Welcome to Late Night Story. When the world goes silent and shadows stretch longer, some stories awaken, whispered only to those still awake. So put on your headphones, turn down the lights, and let me guide you through the quiet hours. If you're listening alone, you're exactly where you need to be. If everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world, don't forget to subscribe before you drift too far into the dark.
Story 1. My 90-year-old grandfather told me something disturbing. "She's buried under that tree," my grandfather whispered, pointing out the window to the front lawn. Oh boy, I thought. Here we go again. For 90 years old, Grandpa was physically capable. He could move, do basic chores, and eke out a decent existence. His primary weakness was his mind. "Who's buried there?" I asked, humoring his senility as I adjusted the angle on his lift chair. "The girl with white hair and green skin." Green skin? I wondered. That's new. I fixed Grandpa's chair to recline position and made my way to the kitchen. "I'm gonna make us some sandwiches." "All right, sweetie." I left him there in front of the TV. This weekend was my monthly visit. My siblings and I switched weekends to make sure Grandpa wasn't alone. The location was inconvenient because he lived in the ass crack of nowhere. It was a good 2 hours to the nearest town. If you needed something other than general store items, you'd be driving for a while. After I finished the sandwiches, I slid one on a plate and placed it in Grandpa's lap. "Thanks, honey," he said, and started chewing with yellow teeth. I sat down on the sofa, cracked open a murder mystery book. A golf tournament was playing on TV. I hated golf, but that was the only thing he liked, so I occasionally glanced out the window at the beautiful vista to keep myself from boredom. Grandpa's property was strange in that it was high up in the mountains, appropriate for farming, but his specific land hadn't been built for that. He lived in a mobile home just beneath a hill. There were trees decorating the terrain, but the only one on his quarter-acre lawn was a pine my father had brought up years ago as a sapling. It was well over 12 feet now. "She's buried there," he mumbled, devouring a slice of ham on bread. Why does he keep saying that? I focused my gaze on the tree in the lawn. What an odd thing to hallucinate. 2 hours later, I was interrupted by a call from my brother, Stu. "Hey, Grace," he said, his voice as cheerful as ever. "How's Gramps?" "Coping," I said. Grandpa had fallen asleep in his chair, a half-eaten sandwich in his lap. "He's resting after a light lunch." "Good. He needs that." I returned to the couch, saved a spot in my murder mystery. My eyes fell on the lonely pine outside. "Stu, can I ask you something?" "Sure, sis." "Has Grandpa mentioned anything about a green girl buried under a tree?" Stu fell silent. "Stu, give me a second. You there?" "Yeah, just a minute." A heavy sigh. "When did he start mentioning it?" "This morning." "Don't let him talk about it." "Why not?" "Because he gets all worked up. When Jess and I were there last month, we found him digging a hole under the tree at 2 in the morning. He thinks someone lives down there. He belongs in a care home." I turned towards Grandpa, noted his frail shoulders, the muscles that had carried bales of hay and iron tools for years. Now his body was fading. "Grace, I'm still here. Make sure he doesn't talk about it." It was 5:15 when I cleared the plates from the dining table. "Thanks for cooking, sweetheart." "Of course, Grandpa. Need help getting to bed?" "No," he sighed, seemingly deep in thought. He pushed himself out of his seat, waddled down the hall. It took him so long to reach the other end of the trailer. "Grace." He stopped at his bedroom door. "Yes. You do believe me about the girl under the tree?" "Yes, Grandpa." "Good. If anything happens, stay by my side. I'll protect you." "Huh." With that, Grandpa cracked open his bedroom door and slipped inside. Whack! My eyes shot open. It was dark, maybe 1 in the morning. Whack! A hard metallic noise thundered in my ears. What was that? Whack! I stumbled out of bed, disoriented, face aching with exhaustion. I ripped open the blinds. A man was swinging a tool at the foot of the pine tree. Grandpa, I raced his room. The bed was empty. Whack! The metallic clangs grew louder. What's happening? I ran to the sofa, grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and stumbled outside. The moon was barely up. Cold air bit my skin as I pulled my shirt close, covering my body. Just ahead, Grandpa was hunched at a 12-foot pine, swinging a pickaxe. I was so stunned to see him lifting the massive tool. Grandpa, where you? She's coming, Grace. I have to set her free. Grandpa, it's 3 in the morning. I have to get her out. I grabbed Grandpa's wrist, but he shoved me back. I landed on my posterior, my flashlight's beam illuminating his face, wide with terror. Don't stop me, Grace. If I don't let her out, she'll take you too. Without another word, he slammed his tool into the earth. The next morning, Grandpa and I sat at the table chewing bacon and eggs. Neither of us had slept. Grandpa, he looked at me with weariness in his eyes. What happened last night? He let out a deep sigh, pulled out a worn shoe box from a cabinet. See this? He brought out a stack of black and white photos. This is your grandmother, Belle, and me a few years after we were married. And here, he tapped the face of an adorable boy, is your father. In the background of the picture, I noticed a young girl, maybe 4 years old, perched on a fence, watching everyone with a miserable gaze. Who's that? The green girl. She's the one who's buried under that tree. She took your father and grandmother. Now she's coming for me. Why? Because she's deaf. Deaf? Boom. The front door lurched with sudden impact. Grandpa and I swerved our gazes, deep in fear and concentration. Didn't you think it was odd how Grandma died so young? And your father? Boom. This girl lived in the woods. She was there for each family member who passed on. Boom. My uncle, Aunt, well, I figured out. I found her in the woods. Made sure she never came after us again. You killed a child? She's no child, Grace. She's evil. And she's coming for me? Boom. I ran to the couch, peered out the window to see a hunched figure wearing old pioneer clothes. They were bashing their fist against the door. Someone's out there. It's all right, Grace. She only wants me. The slamming grew more intense. I retraced my steps to the table. Why is she harassing our family? I don't know, Grace, but it's been like that ever since I was a boy. Whatever you do, don't make eye contact with her. Boom. The front door caved in under the pressure. I closed my eyes, then reopened them. A strange figure stood in the door frame, about 4 feet tall, dressed in worn rags. Her skin was as green as a pine tree's leaves. Long white hair flowed down her back. She's here. The green girl shuffled toward us across the carpet. I watched in suspense, so scared I could barely breathe. My eyes searched for a weapon and found a letter opener. I reached for it. Stop, Grace. This is to happen. I gawked in horror as the green girl lurched up to Grandpa, let out a blood-chilling gasp. The sound of her breath stung my ears. Grandpa commanded, "Only me? That's the deal." The green girl grabbed his face with bone-thin hands and held her mouth over his. A sickening sound of rushing wind accompanied her widening mouth. Grandpa gave a frightened gasp, then collapsed. Grandpa! The green girl let out a sickening groan, limped back to the door. Wait! The creature looked at me. Why are you doing this? The green girl pointed at the clock hanging above the dining table, then pointed at herself, then me. For the next few seconds, I was too shocked to move. With a final groan, the green girl limped out the front door and was gone. It's been 2 days. I called the sheriff. They investigated everything. I've been asked so many questions. My siblings think I'm crazy. Stu's the only one who believes me. Why? He says that one night, while he was at Grandpa's, he heard a woman speaking in one of the rooms. It reminded him of a soothing voice he had once heard as a young boy. A voice that told him the exact date he would die, and that date wasn't far off. Story 2. I've been a cab driver for over a decade. There are rules when driving passengers at night. There's a reason we're scared of the dark. That familiar discomfort when you're driving alone at night. Even if you don't see anyone on the road around you, it's instinct, a warning built into your bones. Because there are things out there, beings we can't explain. They don't show up on camera. They don't care about your pepper spray, but they follow rules. Ancient ones. Rituals, maybe. I don't know where they come from or who made them, but I've learned this much. If you follow the rules, they'll leave you alone. I just never thought I'd experience something like that behind the wheel of a damn cab. People think being a rideshare driver is simple, and they're right for the most part. You drive, you talk if they want to talk, you drop them off, you get paid. No real boss breathing down your neck, no office politics, no deadlines. Just a road, your car, and a playlist long enough to keep you entertained between rides. That's why I started doing it in the first place. After I left my old job, I didn't want to deal with people anymore. Not really. I've been a mechanic for 20 years. Ran my own shop until my knees gave out and my business went to shit. The rideshare apps came at the right time. I didn't have to smile if I didn't want to. I didn't have to fix anybody's problems. Just get them where they were going. During the day, it's easy. College kids heading class, nurses pulling doubles, grocery store runs for people without cars. Honest, quiet work. Sometimes I'd even enjoy the small talk. I liked hearing about their lives. Felt like I was doing something good, even if it was just 5 stars and a quiet thanks. But at night, things change. The air gets heavy. The people get strange. I remember when I first heard about the rules of the road after sundown. Not guidelines, not suggestions. Rules. They show up on the app the second the sun begins to set. And if you break one, well, let's just say you don't want to find out what happens. I'm sure this is very confusing to hear for the first time. So let me explain. Every night shift starts the same. Right after sunset, the app buzzes and emits a strange sound. Not a standard chirp a notification makes. Something dull and stringy, like a warning siren before a storm, on a much smaller scale, of course. The screen goes black just before a message appears in blocky text. Night shift protocol, active between sunset and sunrise. 1. Do not look at passengers directly. Use the rear view mirror if you must. 2. Do not accept payment greater than the cab fare. Never take gifts. 3. Only process one ride at a time. Never allow multiple passengers in your car. 4. Make sure your final passenger is dropped off before sunrise. I review them every time, even though I've got them memorized. I don't know if the app updates them or if something darker is watching to make sure I read them. Either way, I never skip that screen. At least, I don't anymore. I made the mistake of ignoring the rules once, and that was one time too many. I never really was a superstitious man. Back when I started doing nights, I laughed. Rules like these felt like a joke, some edgy tech campaign or something. The kind of stuff that gets passed around on Halloween to show they're being hip and festive. But the thing is, these rules, they're the real deal. The consequences are even more real. I learned that the hard way. It started with something small, just a guy who insisted on paying double. He said he appreciated my service, said I looked tired and he wanted to bless me. He pulled out a crisp 100 and set it gently on the center console. I told him no. He insisted. I told him again. He smiled and slipped it into the cup holder. It's yours either way, man. I didn't touch it. Just left it there until he was gone. I mean, what's the harm? The guy looked unremarkable after all. A middle-aged gentleman with slick-back salt and pepper hair, reading glasses, t-shirt and a vest. Gave me easygoing surfer vibes. Then I looked up in the mirror. He was still there. I heard him leave, heard the door shut behind him, and saw him disappear into the dark. But he was there, grinning. His eyes were all black. He mouthed something, but the words didn't match the movement, like a broken puppet trying to whisper a prayer. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I reached back, heart pounding. The seat was empty. He was nowhere to be found, except for the mirror. He stayed there for the rest of the drive, just smiling, chatting away. I parked my cab in the farthest corner of my apartment's lot, locked the doors, and went inside. That $100 bill stayed exactly where it was, untouched, humming with some quiet, invisible pressure. I could feel its presence everywhere I went. Something was trying to make me go back for it. Spend it maybe? I wasn't sure, but I needed help to make it go away. I contacted support through the app. There's no helpline, no human name, just a form with one question. Describe your incident. I typed everything. The passenger, the tip, the mirror. I waited. I felt so silly. 24 hours later, I got a reply. Protocol breach acknowledged. Remedial steps required before shift may resume. Burn the foreign currency. Avoid seafood for 2 full days. Thanks for contacting technical support. That was it. No apology. No explanation. Just instructions. I picked up the $100 bill like it was a loaded firearm and was surprised by the weight of it. I went out to the alley behind my complex and set on fire in a soup can. The flames hissed green for a moment, then evaporated. It didn't smell like money burning. It smelled like salt and old fish. I skipped sushi that week. Thankfully, I am not much of a fish guy. By the 3rd night, the app let me log in again, and like nothing ever happened, the rides returned. It has been pretty smooth sailing ever since. Not every shift is terrifying. Some are just weird, like the woman in the bright yellow dress who got in without saying a word and only whispered her destination, the bog. Or the man who didn't blink, stared straight ahead, and screamed every time we passed a fire hydrant. The weirdest ride I ever gave was from last November. It was around 3:12 a.m., that dead stretch of time where the world feels empty. I was parked near the outskirts of town, engine idling, watching a moth dive repeatedly into the windshield. A ping came through. There was no address, just coordinates. I almost declined. Nobody lives way out there. It's all farmland and old sheds. But I was behind on rent, and I was pretty good at following the rules at this point. The profile picture was blank. Name just said M. Fine. I accepted. As I approached the pickup spot, my headlights hit something standing in the middle of the road. A man. No, a figure. Very still, dressed in old-fashioned clothes. Black hat, long coat, hands folded in front of him like he was at a funeral. I stopped. He didn't move. I glanced at the app. The pin was directly on him. Against my better judgment, I rolled down the window a few inches. Hey, are you M? The figure nodded once. I unlocked the doors and pulled up the rules panel on the app on my phone. Same rules as always. No change. I read over the first one for good measure. Do not look at passengers directly. Use the rear view mirror if you must. Right. He opened the back door and slid in. Didn't speak. Just sat there, the seat creaking under his weight. I pulled away from the shoulder and merged back onto the main road. The silence was suffocating. I snuck a glance into the rear view mirror. At first, I saw nothing. Then the mirror fogged up, as if someone had breathed on it from the inside. I wiped away the condensation with my thumb, and nearly jumped in my seat at what was revealed beneath. The figure in the back seat wasn't looking at me. It was holding something. A large postcard, pressed flat against its face like a mask. Long fingers curled around edges. Fingers with nails so long and yellow, they looked rotted. Just the sight of them sent a cold wave down my spine. I leaned forward just slightly, enough to make out the writing. 2 words, scrawled across the card in what looked like red ink. Or blood. I couldn't tell. Just drive, it said. I didn't ask questions. I drove. For 40 minutes. We cruised past silent fields, dead gas stations, and stretches of road I swear I'd never seen on any map. I didn't get a destination update. No timer. Just me, the road, and whatever was sitting behind me. The silence felt thicker than usual. The only sound was the low hum of the engine and the occasional creak of the frame. Like the car itself felt uneasy. I kept checking the rear view, but the mirror kept fogging up over and over. I wiped it clean with the side of my hand, each time revealing the same thing. He was closer. At first, he was sitting upright, stiff, almost mannequin-like. Next time, he was leaning slightly forward. Then his knees were nearly touching the back of my seat. His hat was old and stained, the brim tipped just low enough to hide most of his face, torn in one corner, frayed like it had been dragged through gravel. I couldn't see his eyes, but I could feel them like heat on the back of my neck. A cold sweat was forming along my forehead. I didn't know what to do. No name, no timer, no destination. That had never happened before. I gripped the wheel tighter and kept driving, heart pounding louder than the tires on the asphalt. What do I do if he doesn't leave? What if he just sits there until the sun comes up? Something bad would happen. I didn't know what exactly, but I knew the rules. This wasn't just another creepy fare. At exactly 4 a.m., he tapped the window twice. I pulled over. Before I could say a word, the door creaked open and slammed shut. I checked the mirror. Fog gone. Seat empty, except for something left behind. There was a small envelope with one of those fancy wax seals. Inside was a bundle of tattered cash wrapped in a classy red bow. Not a cent over the fare. Thank God. I set it aside and sat there for a while, just breathing. The car was finally quiet. Still, that night feels like it happened ages ago. I'm more seasoned now. Passengers without destinations? Common occurrence these days. Took me a while to realize they're not chasing a place. They're chasing a feeling, a reaction. They're insatiable like that. But I've learned a lot since then. I know better than to feed their desires. You give them the cold shoulder long enough, and eventually they leave. These days I'm more composed, like a prison warden ferrying rowdy inmates. I even bought a pistol. It sits in the glove compartment, mostly idle. But if someone in the back gets bold, starts creeping too close, a little flash of the barrel is usually enough. They growl. They curse. Slam the door behind them. Cab fare left on the seat. Not a cent overpaid. I don't bother being gentle. It's not like they can tip me. But tonight, I am feeling a bit more anxious than usual. It isn't because of the job. Nope. Supernatural cab passengers are a walk in the park compared to what I have in store tomorrow. My son's getting married. I haven't been part of his life. Not really. That was my fault. I kept my distance after the divorce. Told myself he'd be better off without me hovering around. No awkward visits. No clumsy father-son talks. Just space. But when the invitation came, I cried. I just sat on the couch, clutching that envelope, and cried like I hadn't in years. There was no way I was missing it. I've missed too much already. I should be resting right now, getting ready for the big day. But I needed to calm my nerves. For some odd reason, this job does it for me. Midnight hits. The app dings. First ride of the night. I take a deep breath and swipe to accept. Gotta focus. Just get through the shift. Then it's straight to the hotel, change into the suit, and head to the ceremony. The guy who gets in looks normal. Collared shirt, dark jeans, clean cut. He slides into the back seat without a word at first. I start driving. A few blocks in, he speaks up. Big night. I nod. Yeah, my son's getting married tomorrow. Oh, that's great. What's his name? I hesitate. James. He repeats it, real slow. James. Strong name. What time's the wedding? 2. I say, eyes fixed on the road. He grins. That's wonderful. You must be proud. I give a tight smile but don't answer. Something about the way he's asking, all this makes me uneasy. It's not the questions. People make small talk all the time. It's the way he leans in when he speaks, like he already knows the answers, like he's confirming something. We pull up to his drop-off. He thanks me, steps out, and just stands there on the curb, staring through the rear window. I look straight ahead and pretend not to notice. After a few seconds, he disappears into the dark. I sit there in silence, hands still on the wheel. That was strange. Even stranger than usual. Then it hits me. The rules. I forgot to check the rules tonight. I pulled up the app and swiped to the rules section. Crap, there's a new rule. Don't talk to the passengers about your personal life. I stare at the screen, like maybe I'm reading it wrong. Like maybe it's always been there, and I just never noticed. But I know better. That rule wasn't there yesterday. My heart starts pounding. I pull over, open the app, and send a message to support. Something simple. There's a new rule. I broke it. How bad is this? What should I do? No reply. Silence ensued. Last time I broke the rules, it took 24 hours to respond. And I don't have 24 hours. Eventually, I pull back onto the road. I figure I'll do a couple more drop-offs. Keep things simple. Maybe if I don't mess up again, everything will smooth over. The next few passengers seem normal enough. Quiet. But there's this weird vibe. A kind of smugness. A few of them chuckle under their breath. One guy keeps stealing glances at me in the rear view, like I'm the punchline, some inside joke. Another girl won't stop smiling. Just this too wide grin like she knows some deep, dark secret about me. It starts to wear on me. By the third ride like that, my stomach's turning. And then it gets worse. My next pickup is a woman standing alone on the corner in full wedding attire. A long white dress, veil, bouquet. It looks new, clean, not like a Halloween thing. This looks real, expensive. She doesn't speak when she gets in, just hums softly. Then she starts singing. Here Comes a Bride. Over and over. Whispered. Off-key, like she's only half remembering the melody. The hair on my arm stands up. I drive in silence. Try not to react. She keeps singing all the way to her destination. And just before she opens the door, she leans forward and whispers, "So, when's the wedding?" I say nothing. She tilts her head like a confused bird. Then she gets out and drifts off into the dark, dragging the bottom of the dress behind her. I'm breathing hard now, knuckles white on the wheel. Next ride, a guy in a wrinkled button-up shirt, tie hanging loose. He climbs and already shouting. He was a goddamn mechanic. And you know what? He was useless. Sat on his ass for 20 years and expects me to be grateful. I keep driving. He doesn't stop. My fiancée wants me to invite him. Can you believe that? To my own wedding? She doesn't know the guy. Help, I don't even know the guy. He starts banging his fist on the seat in rhythm, like he's working himself up to something. I glance in the rear view. Big mistake. His eyes are wide, wild, red around the edges. There's something shiny in his lap. For a second, I think it's a phone. It's not. Without warning, he raises a pistol, sticks it under his chin, and pulls the trigger. A deafening pop. The windshield doesn't shatter, but I hear the spray hit the back window. He slumps sideways. The door opens on its own, like someone was helping him out. I hear his body land on the sidewalk with a thump, and the door slams shut behind him. I don't stop. I don't check. I just keep driving. Like I said, I'm a seasoned driver now. Sad to say, this isn't the first time one of these loons popped themselves in the back seat to try and get me to turn around. I have bigger issues to worry about. The rule break hung heavy in my head, and I still haven't heard back from support. The next passenger looked relatively normal. Clean cut, mid-20s, button-down shirt tucked into dark jeans. He smiled as he climbed into the back seat. Polite nod. No words. The last few rides have been unsettling, to say the least. But this guy felt different. Not better. Just different. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Something in his silence felt smug. Like he already knew me. Like we'd done this before. We drove for 15 minutes without a word. Then I pulled up to the hotel. He didn't move. I shifted into park and turned slightly. Still not looking directly at him. Just using the mirror. This is the address. You're good to go. He stared at me. No change in expression. No acknowledgement. And then I heard it. A knock on the driver's side window. Dad. I nearly jumped out of my skin. I turned, and there he was, James, my son, in his dress shirt and slacks, standing outside the hotel, looking confused and a little nervous. The same hotel he and the groomsmen were staying at tonight. How could I forget? I forced a smile. Oh, hey, son. Just dropping someone off. You nervous for tomorrow? He squinted at me like something was off. Yeah, can we talk? My stomach tightened. I had to get this guy out of the car. Sure. Just let me finish this ride. I'll come inside after, okay? His eyes drifted past me to the back seat. "Troy," he said. I froze. The figure in the back seat leaned forward, rested his elbows casually on the front headrest. His smile widened. "Hey man, can you believe this? I ran into your pops and figured we'd do a quick beer run before the big day. Hop in." My blood went cold. No, that isn't Troy, I thought to myself. But I couldn't tell James that. I don't know what would happen if I did. This was bad. Really bad. "No," James said, shaking his head in disbelief. "Troy, you were just inside. You were with the guys. How did you get out here so fast?" The figure didn't break character. He laughed like it was a shared joke between friends. James looked between us, clearly unnerved. "Dad, who is that?" I didn't wait for the thing in the back to answer. This couldn't go on any longer. I slammed the car into drive and tore out of the parking lot, tires screeching, engine roaring. In the mirror, James was yelling something, running after us. I couldn't hear him. "You're gonna miss the wedding," the thing said, voice perfectly calm. "That's not very fatherly of you." "Shut up," I snapped. "You're not getting in my head." "Oh, come on. It could." "Don't be like that. Your son talks about you all the time. To me, to everyone." I kept my eyes on the road, jaw clenched so tight I could feel in my temples. Although he doesn't say good things. "You're not a good father, Ben." "Shut up," I hissed, tears bubbling in the corner of my eyes. "You missed birthdays, missed milestones. What are you even doing now? Trying to show up at the last second and pretend it means something?" I gripped the wheel harder. I wanted to slam the brakes, throw open the door, and drag this thing out by whatever skin it had stolen. "Oh, don't be like that, Ben. I have something that'll cheer you up," it whispered. "Just keep driving, all the way until the sun comes up. I have something to show you." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. My phone buzzed on the seat beside me. "James?" Again, I didn't answer. The only sound in the car was the hum of the tires and that thing breathing behind me, waiting. I wasn't sure what to do now. The passenger gave me a drop-off and refused to get out. That hasn't really happened before. There's no way for me to force it out either. Not without looking directly at it. If I couldn't get this guy to leave before the sun came up, I was screwed. It was useless. I pull over hard, tires kicking up dust on the shoulder of the road. The thing in the back doesn't flinch. Just smiles like it's been waiting for this moment all night. I open the glove box and take out my Glock 45. "Oh," it says. "That didn't take long. You already getting tired of me, Ben?" I don't answer. I close my eyes and take a few deep breaths. "Oh, Ben, you don't have to do this. You're going to miss out on all the fun I have in store." I don't even turn around. I raise the gun behind me, steady my breathing, and pull the trigger. The shot is deafening in the confined space. I don't look. I just sit there, ears ringing, heart thudding. I wait for movement, for another voice, but there's nothing. I finally peek into the rear-view mirror once again. It's slumped over in the seat, still smiling, but quiet now, unmoving. I knew that wasn't going to kill this thing, but it still felt good. I just needed to shut it up for a minute. If it wasn't going to leave, so be it. I had to come to terms with that fact. I wasn't going to make it to the wedding. I was going to abandon my son again, this time for good. The least I could do was say sorry, tell him I loved him. I just wish I could have done it sooner. Damn it, I wish I had more time. I pull out my phone, hand shaking. I try to call James back, but it goes straight to voicemail. I speak through the lump in my throat. "Hey, it's Dad. I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. I should have been there for you. I should have been better." The thing in the back seat was sitting upright now, dusting off its blood-soaked shirt and slicking back the loose hair where the bullet exited. I started to sob into the phone. "But I'm proud of you, James. I really am. Despite all my mistakes, you've done everything right. And I'm really, really happy I get to be at your wedding." The mimic was coughing now, pounding its chest with a closed fist. I heard a loud metallic clang as the bullet bounced off one of its teeth on the way out of its throat. I stifle a sob and take a deep breath before continuing. "I love you so much, James. I'll see you soon, buddy." I hang up, tears running down my face, fogging up the screen. I sat there in silence for a few minutes. I watched as an orange glow began to rise from the horizon. It was almost sunrise. I closed my eyes and gripped the steering wheel in grim anticipation. This was it. I wasn't sure what happened if I broke this rule, but I knew there was no coming back from it. Tech support wouldn't be able to help me out of this one. Then I hear clapping. Soft, slow. I look up. In the rear view, I see the thing clapping and wearing a wide smile. Only this time it doesn't look as smug. It appears sincere, genuine. Nice job, Ben, it says. Really touching. It drops a handful of bills into the seat beside it and steps out of the vehicle. It ducks its head inside to give one final farewell. Congrats on your son's wedding. Then it was gone, just before the sunrise. I'm not sure why it decided to leave. All the night passengers want something. A reaction, a release. Most of the time it is something mean-spirited. They crave anger, heartbreak, desperation. Maybe this one was benevolent. Maybe it needed to experience something heartfelt, something real. God knows I needed it too. I'm just glad it's all over. I didn't take any more rides for the rest of the night. I went home, scrubbed the blood off the back seat, even though there wasn't any. Changed the air freshener, even though it still smelled new. Took a long, hot shower. Put on the suit I hadn't worn in years. When I looked in the mirror, I almost didn't recognize myself. I didn't look any different, but I felt different. I wasn't ashamed of the man that looked back at me. I was going to be a new person. I knew it was too late to be a good dad. I've been away too long to fix that, but he would always be my son. And he needed to know that I was never going to abandon him again. I got in the car, not for work, just to drive, to the wedding. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something that almost scared me more than a lifetime of ferrying supernatural passengers. Hope. Story 3. I left Mom to starve. Dried sweat, rotten food, fermented trash, cigarette smoke, dust. The mixture of odors overwhelmed my nose. I had to take a step back, gagging. Once I filled my lungs with fresh air from the outside, I took a step in. I'm home. I called. I left my sneakers by the foyer. Mom's boots were there, gathered among the shoes of siblings long gone. I peeked through the hall and into the living room. It was a mess. Not even the dark could hide the collage of trash, clothes, and empty meal boxes. There was a tricycle next to the couch, tiny and colorful, though children hadn't inhabited this place in almost a decade. Mom had covered the windows with aluminum foil and newspaper. No light bulbs, no lamps. She said light gave her headaches. A lantern was needed to navigate the apartment, or a smartphone. I found Mom sulking in her bedroom, curled into a ball and covered by duvets. What took you so long? Mom's voice was high-pitched and with a well-developed vocal fry. It resembled the creakiness of a rusty door hinge. I lowered my phone light. I told you I went to Emma's bachelorette. You didn't tell me a thing. I stayed here to starve. A sigh got stuck in my throat. God forbid I let it out in front of Mom. Or worse. What if I sighed and then explained to her I bought her a weekend worth of pizza and ready meals? With my money at that, would I survive that? Are you hungry? I asked. Of course I am. It gave me an excuse to leave for another room and encounter yet another frustration. All over the kitchen laid the aftermath of my weekend off. Pizza boxes and plastic containers were scattered across the counter. One of them remained inside the microwave, half-eaten. There were no offerings left for Mom, as she'd eaten them all. I'll go to the store to buy you something. I called. Will you abandon me again? She accented every syllable with spite. I'll be back in an hour. If I had used a bike, the trip to the convenience store would have been 20 minutes. That also meant less time filling my lungs with clean summer air. As I walked, I ruminated on how wonderful and how terrible the sense of smell was. We cannot close our noses like we close our eyes. How inconvenient is that? if I wanted to stop smelling, I also had to stop breathing. There's another way, though. If we smell something for long enough, no matter how pleasant or disgusting, the brain mutes the scent. It took me a lifetime to grow accustomed to the smell of Mom's apartment, and only a weekend off to find it unbearable again. As I entered the supermarket, I quickly glanced at the yard section. They sold garden furniture and flowers and grilling equipment. I grew up thinking no one ever bought those. The gas tanks reminded me of a fun fact. Methane does not have a smell naturally. The characteristic rotten eggs odor gets added to it for safety reasons. That way, an individual can detect a gas leak before the whole building goes kaboom. The phone vibrated in my pocket. It was Emma. "Hey," I answered, searching to the ready meals. "Ready to go?" Calavie answered on the other side. I moved the phone from one ear to the other. Although it was impossible for Mom to be around, I looked over my shoulder. "I can't do it," I said. Calavie took a deep breath. "Tarya, listen, you need to get out of there now." "Now!" I grabbed some meatballs and potatoes. "That would do. I can't. Mom needs someone to take care of her." "What are you even saying?" When upset, Calavie spoke slowly and accenting every word, just like Mom. "I'll be fine. It's Mom. She's an odd person, but she's not evil." "Are you listening to yourself?" He screeched on the other side of the line. It peaked the microphone. "I don't appreciate you yelling at me." I was on the shopping line. Only 2 people stood in front of me. But this was a minuscule town. Everyone knew everyone's faces. What if they heard Calavie losing it over the phone? And what do you want me to do? At least Calavie lowered his voice a little. "You're speaking nonsense. She ate Nina." "She didn't." I scoffed, then lowered my voice to a whisper. "Nina ran away with her boyfriend. You saw it. You saw it happen. What are you talking about?" I envisioned Calavie pulling his hairs out. It was a nightmare. "Seek help. I mean it." I placed a ready meal and an energy drink on the treadmill. And Mom needs help and compassion. That's the only way she can get better. You're not helping her. You're feeding her. The products reached the hands of the cashier. A sign to end this senseless call. "I need to go back home. Talk to you later." I hung up with Calavie mid-sentence. I packed my purchases and walked back home. Him screaming caught me off guard. It hurt a little. We had a great bachelorette together. Unlike Mom's house, Calavie's was clean and sleek, with plenty of sunlight, and even when those little robot vacuums rolling around. I was happy to see him doing good despite everything. I was happy to see him, period. None of the other siblings gave us that grace. They left home to disappear. Calavie said they didn't leave. She ate them all. But he didn't feel like talking about Mom, much less in front of his wife. She believed he was an orphan. I shook off the memories of our weekend together. Left him at the door along with the prospect of fresh air. One deep breath, and I was ready to go back to Mom. As I microwaved the meal, I realized I had forgotten to buy something for myself. Too late to go back to the store. However, I went to sleep hungry. A bad idea. Hunger always brought nightmares. Hungry Mom always brought nightmares. In darkness, I woke, my body unresponsive and my mind hazy. It happened so often, and yet I never got used to it. Panic kicked in, as usual. No matter how much I begged in my head, not even a finger would move. Even my eyes stayed glued on the same spot. I was trapped in my own body. Some light from a midnight sun bled through the window. Usually a blessing, the light now delineated Mom's terrible form. She watched from the ceiling, her eyes glistening in the darkness. Her floppy belly, product of almost a dozen childbirths, drooped above my mobile body. Her sagittals dangled atop my head. Both elbows pointed toward the floor unnaturally. They were backwards. She resembled a spider. Slowly, Mom crawled down the wall, closer to the headboard. The drywall cracked as she buried her nails and toes onto it. Soon I felt her sparse hair tickling my forehead. I tried to scream, but my mouth remained shut. My lungs wouldn't breathe faster. My eyes refused to shed tears. My whole body remained still, like the corpse I'd soon become. Nina never had a boyfriend. I once saw her kissing another girl at the lake. and I saw how Mom crawled to her bed that night. Mom looked like a crocodile wearing a human suit, her arms and legs bent uncomfortably at impossible angles. She opened her mouth wide, impossibly so. I heard the crack as her jawline popped out of its sockets. I saw how she sucked onto Nina's scalp like ice cream, then nibbled it. She crawled further into Nina's bed as she swallowed her head, then her neck, then her shoulders. She pushed forward, her breasts, her hips, her thighs. Only Nina's ankles and feet dangled out her mouth. Mom gargled, struggling to consume the last bits of Nina. Her whole body contracted as she swallowed what was left of my older sister. I was next. I felt Mom's breath next to my ear, warm and humid. It stank of cigarettes and acid. She gently pushed my face to the side. You left me to starve. She punctured a hole in my neck, the one that never healed. I always said it was a birthmark. Immobile, helpless, stupid, with no other option. I waited until she fed herself. In my head, I promised, never again I'll let this happen. Never again I'll leave Mom to starve. She needs me. Story 4. I moved into my grandparents' cabin. I don't think I'm alone here. When my grandfather passed, I inherited his cabin by the lake. It wasn't much, one story, drafty in winter, built back when insulation meant more wood. But it was quiet, peaceful. At least, that's what I thought. I moved in last fall. The air smelled like wet pine, and the lake behind the house looked like black glass at night. I'd stand on the back porch with a beer, listening to crickets and the occasional splash from fish breaking the surface. For the first month, it was perfect. No neighbors for a mile, no traffic, no city noise. Then I started hearing it. The first time, it was around 2 a.m. I'd fallen asleep on the couch and woke up to what sounded like someone slowly dragging a shovel through the mud outside. Long, wet scrapes. Pauses between them, like they were listening for something. I sat up, held my breath, and it stopped. The next morning, I checked the shore. There was a line in the mud, about 4 inches deep, starting from the tree line and ending at the water's edge. No footprints, just that strange trench. After that, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching the cabin at night. I kept the curtains closed, but every so often I'd hear that same dragging sound outside, always starting in the woods and heading toward the water, always stopping when I got too close to the windows. One night in December, I caught it. I woke to the sound again, this time closer, right outside the porch. I crept to the back door and pulled aside the curtain just enough to peek. There was something standing in the frost-covered yard, backlit by the moon. It was tall, at least 7 feet, with limbs too long for its body. Its skin hung in loose folds, like it had been stretched over the wrong frame. It was holding something in one hand. A stick, maybe. No, not a stick. It was a long, pale spine. The sound I'd heard was it dragging the tip of it through the frozen dirt. Its head, God, its head, it didn't have a face. Not in the way we do. Just a long vertical slit, opening and closing like gills, flexing in the cold air. I must have made some noise, because its head snapped toward me, that slit opening wide enough to show rows of needle-thin teeth inside. Then it turned and walked into the lake. Not into the shallows, straight in until the water swallowed a hole. I tried to convince myself I was dreaming, but over the next week, I found more of those trenches in the mud, always leading to the water, always starting closer to the cabin. Last night, it changed. I woke to the sound again, dragging slow, but this time it didn't stop. It moved around the cabin, circling it. Once, twice, then it stopped at the front door. The porch creaked, and then I heard it tapping. Something sharp, rapping on the wood in slow, steady beats. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps. Like it was waiting. I didn't open the door. I waited with a kitchen knife in my hand until dawn. When I finally got the nerve to check outside, the porch was covered in frost except for where it had stood. The boards there were slick with something that wasn't ice. It was thick, almost gelatinous, and smell faintly like blood. It's almost midnight now. The cabin feels smaller. Somehow, the lake's black surface is perfectly still. And somewhere out there, I can hear it dragging that spine again, this time coming from the shoreline toward me. I think it's getting bolder. I double-check every lock in the cabin. Front door, back door, windows, even the crawl space hatch under the kitchen. Every latch slid into place with a soft click that felt far too quiet against the sound outside. The dragging had stopped. That was worse. I stood in the living room, knife in one hand, flashlight in the other, listening. The only sound was my own breathing, quick, uneven. Then, from somewhere behind the cabin, I heard it, a slow, deliberate creak of wood underweight. The back porch. I forced myself to keep still, every muscle in my body rigid. The sound came again, closer this time, and then there was a new one, the faint rasp of nails or claws, tracing the length of siding. It was walking perimeter. The scratching moved from the back to the side, dragging low near the foundation, then high up by the windows, testing the walls, measuring me. I thought about turning on the outside floodlight. Then I thought about the possibility of seeing it. My hand shook so bad I nearly dropped the flashlight. When it reached the front of the cabin, it stopped. Silence again. I kept my eyes on the door, heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. Then the tapping. 3 slow knocks, each one heavier than the last, making the door shudder in its frame. Pause. 3 more. It did that for nearly a minute. Then the sound changed, a wet, rhythmic thud against the wood, like it was pressing something heavy into the door and dragging it down. I imagined that pale spine, slick with whatever was on the porch board the night before, leaving streaks down the grain. I backed away toward the bedroom, still facing the door. My plan was to lock myself in, maybe wedge the dresser against it. But before I could move more than a few steps, the cabin groaned. Not from the door, from above. My stomach dropped. The roof. I could hear it moving, each step bending the old beams just enough to make them moan. It was slow, deliberate, pacing the length of the house like a predator above a cage. Dust drifted down from the ceiling fan as it stopped directly over me. That's when I heard it breathe. It wasn't the kind of breath you take through lungs. It was a deep, vibrating pull of air that made the walls hum, like the cabin itself was being inhaled, and mixed into it was a faint, wet clicking like teeth snapping together in some private rhythm. I didn't move, didn't blink. My legs felt hollow, barely able to hold me up. Then something fell from the ceiling. It landed right in front of me, a piece of wood no bigger than my thumb, splintered and dark with moisture. I looked up, and for the briefest second, I saw it between the slats, that slit where its face should be, teeth flexing inside, where it was strand of something that clung like spider silk. It slid out of view again. That was it. I bolted for the bedroom and locked the door. I shoved the dresser in front of it, then sat on the floor with my back against the wall, knife pointed at the door like I'd be able to do anything if it came in. It paced the roof for what felt like hours. Every so often it would stop, and I'd hear that long, deep inhale again. Only this time, I realized it wasn't drawing the cabin. It was smelling me. At some point, the pacing stopped entirely. The silence that followed was somehow worse. I strained to hear anything. Footsteps, scratching, the drag of the spine. But there was nothing. I thought maybe it had left. Then the bedroom window behind me began to bulge. The glass didn't crack. It didn't shatter. It pushed inward, like something was pressing against it from outside. The bulge grew, stretching until I could see the faintest outline of that slit. Teeth just barely visible behind the thin distortion of the glass. It didn't strike. It didn't try to break in. It just stayed there, breathing against the window until the pain was fogged over from the inside. And then, so slowly I almost missed it, the fog began to pull back like it was drawing my air out with it. When the sun finally rose, the window was clear, the roof was empty, the porch was bare, but in the frost at the end of the driveway, I found a single mark, a trench in the dirt, starting at the road and ending at my front steps. It's almost midnight again now, and I can hear it coming back. I'd been awake all day. No naps, No dozing on the couch. I wanted to be alert for tonight. Didn't matter when darkness settled over the lake. The exhaustion hit me like a drug. My eyelids felt weighted, my head thick and heavy. It wasn't just lack of sleep. It felt imposed, like the air was laced with something pulling me under. I fought it by pacing the cabin, flashlights sweeping every corner. The walls creaked in the cold. But beneath that, I could hear the lake, a soft, constant lap, lap, lap of water on the shore. And over it, faintly, that dragging sound again. I killed every light inside. If it wanted to see me, it would have to look through the dark. I stationed myself in the kitchen, where I could see both the front and back doors. The dragging came closer, circling the cabin. Then it stopped. I didn't hear it for almost 5 minutes. Then the sound came again, inside the walls. The noise was subtle at first, like something brushing along the insulation. Then it got heavier, shifting, moving from the kitchen wall toward the living room. The board shivered with each scrape, like it was wedging itself through spaces too small for anything human. I backed up, keeping the knife raised. The sound reached the corner where the chimney met the wall and stopped. A soft, hollow thunk came from the fireplace. I'd never used it. The flue had been closed since I moved in. Now, the metal lever clinked once, twice, before the cover inside began to bulge downward. Bits of soot fell into the empty hearth. Something was forcing the flue open from the wrong direction. The cover gave with a sharp metallic ping, swinging down hard enough to rattle the fire tools on their hooks. For a moment, there was only darkness inside. Then a hand slid into view. It was too long, too thin. The skin was that same loose, folded hide I'd seen before, but it shifted unnaturally, like something was swimming just beneath it. The fingers bent in ways they shouldn't as they searched along the brick, tapping and probing. They reached the edge of the hearth and stopped. The tips turned upward toward me. Slowly, deliberately, I stepped back. The fingers curled into a beckoning motion. I don't remember deciding to run, but suddenly I was in the bedroom, shoving the dresser harder against the door than before. My breath came in quick bursts, and each one felt stolen from me. For a few minutes, I heard nothing. Then, faint, nearly inaudible, came a tapping from the other side of the bedroom wall. It started near the floor, rose higher, then higher still, until it was right over my head. That's when I remembered the attic. The cabin didn't have a proper attic, just a low crawl space above the ceiling, accessible from a panel in the hallway. I could hear the sound moving across it now, the boards flexing with each crawl. The panel creaked. It didn't fall open. Instead, I saw one corner pressed downward slightly, like something was testing it. A single, hairline crack appeared in the wood. Then another. Dust fell in thin streams. And in the dust were little wet spots, like condensation from breath. I held the knife, so tight my hand went numb. I was ready for the panel to drop, ready for it to pour through, but it didn't. Instead, the sound moved back across the ceiling toward the living room. And then came the worst part, silence. I sat there for nearly an hour before I worked up the courage to check. I slid the dresser away in small jerks, every creak loud enough to make my chest ache. When I stepped into the hall, the panel was flush again, no sign it had moved. The living room was empty. The kitchen was empty. Even the hearth looked untouched. I started to think maybe it had given up. Then I saw the front door. The deadbolt was still locked. The chain was still in place. But the entire door frame was subtly warped, bowed inward like it had been under immense pressure from the outside. And in the center of the door, pressed into the wood, was the shape of a handprint, too large, too thin, with fingers that tapered into points. It hadn't been trying to get in through one way. It had been testing all of them. I'm writing this now as the sun comes up, but I don't know how much longer I can stay here. It's learning the cabin, learning me. Last night, it tried the roof, the walls, the fireplace, the attic, and the door. Tonight, it might not try at all. Tonight, it might succeed. I didn't sleep at all today. Not that it matters anymore. I nailed the windows shut, wedge-locked the doors, stuffed blankets in the fireplace, and duct-taped them in place. Even put a chair under the attic panel, so I'd hear it fall. The cabin feels like a coffin I've built for myself. The lake is wrong tonight. It's too still, like the water itself is holding its breath. Even the crickets have gone silent. The air feels thicker, almost humid, but cold enough to make my teeth ache. I'm sitting at the kitchen table with the knife and flashlight in front of me. I keep telling myself I'm ready. That if it comes, I'll know where to hit. But there's no plan here, no strategy, just waiting. The first sound isn't dragging. It's knocking, not at the door, from inside the walls. It's moving fast, circling me in tight loops, the sound bouncing from one corner of the cabin to the next. The boards are trembling, dust falling in little showers. Then the knock stopped. From somewhere above, the roof bows inward, creaking under weight. I glance at the attic panel. Still closed, still pinned under the chair. Something drips onto the kitchen table. I look up. The ceiling above me is damp. Water stains spreading outward in a slow bloom. But it's not water. It's that same gelatinous, faintly bloody stuff I found on the porch weeks ago. Another drop lands on my hand. It's warm. The attic panel doesn't open. It bursts, knocking the chair aside, with splintering as something unfolds itself through the gap. I see limbs first. Too many to count in the moment. Sliding down the wall, folding over the counter, bracing against the floor. And then the head, that slit where its face should be flexed is wide, and I hear it. Not a roar, not a hiss, but a deep inhalation that makes the lights flicker. The air feels thinner instantly, my chest tightening as it pulls at something deeper than breath. I run. I don't remember making the choice, but suddenly I'm at the back door, kicking the chair away from the handle, fumbling with the locks. Behind me, the thing's limbs slap against the floor in uneven rhythms, scraping, reaching. I slam the door open and bolt into the night. The cold bites through me immediately, the air wet and sharp. The lake's black surface stares back at me, and for a second, I consider running for the tree line instead, but there's movement between the pines. Too tall, too thin, more than one. The water is my only option. I make it halfway down the slope before something hits the porch behind me. The sound is heavy, final, like it's dropped from the roof to give chase. I don't look back. I can hear it though, that wet spine dragging to the grass as it runs. The shoreline is slick. I nearly fall as I hit the shallows, but I don't stop. I dive into the freezing water, kicking hard until the cabin is a shadow against the hill. I turn then, just to see if it followed. It's standing at the shore, perfectly still, watching. The slit in its head opens wide, teeth flash in the moonlight, and then it does something I haven't heard before. It laughs. Not a human laugh, not even close. But the rhythm is there, the rise and fall, like it's mocking me for thinking the lake could save me. Then it steps forward into the water. I don't remember swimming to the far side. I don't remember climbing out. I remember waking up at dawn on the gravel road, barefoot, shivering so hard I couldn't speak. The sheriff drove me into town. I didn't tell him what happened. I just said someone broke in. He offered to send someone to check the property, but I told him to let it go, because I know what they'll find. Nothing. I'm writing this from a motel 20 miles away, but I can't stop looking at the bathroom door. It's shut, but every now and then I hear a faint dripping sound behind it. If you're anywhere near the lake east of Miller's Crossing, if you hear dragging the night, don't look out the window. It doesn't matter how well you lock the doors. It's already inside. Story 5. Don't swim in my hometown's lake. Don't even go near it. Two suns were shimmering on this particular day in June. The one in the sky, of course, and its twin beaming brightly back at it from the still surface of the lake. My small town thrived on this lake, especially during summer. It was a go-to-local tourist destination within the county. Until recently, our fish population was one of the healthiest and most numerous in contiguous United States. There was a factory, nestled in the surrounding woodland, that used the lake's waters as a coolant for whatever they produced. That factory employed over half of the men in the town until just 5 years ago. when it was purchased by an overseas conglomerate and forced to lay off its entire existing staff. Naturally, this move faced mass protests, but at the end of the day, there was nothing we could do. Now the factory, along with a few rows of beach houses, lay abandoned along the sandy banks. I'm sure you can tell by now that my town was past its prime. Still, we tried to hold on to our title of a landlocked Amity Island, crooked mayor and all. The day it happened, I descended on the beach in the early morning with my friends, intent on staying until sundown. By this point it wasn't too busy, but we knew that by noon, tourists would crowd the banks like locusts. We met up in the commercial area, a zone of kiosks and picnic tables. A few families had already arrived, and small children were playing by the waterside under the watchful eye of a parent. Once we'd all shown up, our little group of mostly 12-year-olds decided that we weren't kids anymore, and that our station for the day should be where the teenagers hang out, the long stony strip that was scattered with empty beer cans and cigarette butts. That didn't necessarily mean we were too old for a little fun by the pier. However, we crowded onto the rickety dock and raced each other to jump from the abrupt end into the clear water beneath. I decided to hang back for a bit. One, I was kept on my friends doing their best drowning impression. The other was on Everly, the hottest girl of my year. She sat alone on a flat stone jutting out from the grassy hill, not too far from the edge of the lake. I caught her eye, took a deep breath and walked over to her. "Hey," I said. "Hi," she replied. She was nursing a quickly melting soft-serve ice cream in a cone. It had mostly liquefied and was running down her arm. "Your ice cream is melting," I pointed out dumbly. "I know," answered Everly. I glanced over at the nearby ice cream truck. "Want me to buy you another one?" I asked casually. She beamed. "Thanks," she said and smiled. I met her smile with my own, then patted my pockets. "I don't have any money," I admitted. She scrunched up her cute nose and laughed. I knew I must have done something right. Before I could continue, I heard someone call Everly's name. I turned and saw a frumpy, middle-aged woman waving her over. She stood and turned to me. "See you later," she said, and dropped her ice cream on the floor. I watched her walk off, and then made my way back to my friends who were only now emerging from the lake. At 13, I was the oldest and therefore the designated leader of the group. It also helped that I knew a shortcut to Birkin Beach, as we'd started calling it. And so, it was me who led the gaggle of tweens away from the now bustling lakeside and into the woodland. We were all in good spirits, and the high we got from the prospect of months without school was more potent than any drug I've tried since. Like the rest of them, I was clad in shorts and a thick layer of sunblock that acted like a second skin. I can remember the childhood bickering and cries of wuss and the occasional pussy directed towards the kids who didn't want to take the shortcut. Despite their protests, they still all followed me. It quickly became clear that I didn't know where I was going. We were now surrounded by trees and had somehow strayed so far away from the lake's edge that we could no longer hear the water lapping at the shore. "You got us lost, man." Tyler, my snub-nosed best friend, said, throw his arms in the air. Everyone else stopped and waited impatiently for my rebuttal. "We're like a 2-minute walk from civilization in any direction. We're not lost." I replied snarkily and started to walk with more determination. Some shortcut, I heard one of the other boys mutter as they all gave up in their short-lived mutiny and followed me again. Soon, the noise of small, gently crashing waves returned. The once thick tree line thinned out like my balding father, and I could once again see the lake laying just beyond our position. Any unfaithfulness my extended friend group had in my sense of direction had dried up. They followed me as we came across a large rock. "It's just beyond this rock," I shouted back at my followers, while I knelt and tied my shoelace. A few attempted to scale the mossy boulder in one jump. One of them, a ginger kid named Jeremy who had a desperately small stature even for his age, managed the ascent first. As soon as he reached the top, he screamed, "Jeremy, what's wrong?" A few of us said in something near unison. On the top of the rock, Jeremy felt his knees. I ran over to him, as did a few others. We climbed up behind him, and as soon as we reached the top, realized what he'd been screaming about, washed up in a miniature inlet that lay behind the rocks, was a human body, a corpse, a person's remains. These were the terms that tumbled through my mind as I stared slack-jawed as the rest of the posse crowded around me. A few had the same silent reaction I did. Some screamed. Jeremy began to cry. It wasn't long before morbid curiosity possessed me. I wasn't the only one. Me and one or two others hopped down from the boulder onto the edge of the thin semicircle inlet. Everyone was freaking out now. So was I suppose I just had a different way of expressing it. Some tried to deny what was right in front of them, claiming it was just fake. I intended to show them what it really was. As a test of my own masculinity and maturity, I picked up a long, thick stick at my feet and walked over beside the body. I admit, I did think the theory that it was fake had some weight after I realized that despite looking severely decayed, it gave off no smell whatsoever. I poked and prodded it. With the help of my other stick-armed friend, we managed to move it partially onto its side. It looked vile, just putrid. There wasn't a single fly or insect around it, but despite this, its face looked like it had been feasted on. The skin was slimy and white, loose adipose that clung to the bloodied skull. Its scalp was rotting away and looking like the threadbare knees of an old pair of ripped jeans. Greasy black hair, which had mostly fallen out, fell down to its shoulders. His nose was replaced with two leaking holes. One socket was empty. From the other dangled a useless eyeball. He, who I assumed was a man, wore green overalls smeared in dirt and other grime that came from spending who knows how long in the lake. When I poked his cheek, yellowing ooze poured out. It was real alright when that realization dawned on me, and the other older kids inspecting the body. Did the gravity of it really sink in? I was looking at a human body, a real-life dead person. I dropped my stick and swore. I couldn't fathom it. Not really. My friend standing across from me shouted to the younger children to leave, to go and get help. Help, I thought, was funny wording. I looked at the corpse at my feet and thought he was long past CPR. Then it grabbed me. Its bony hand shot out like an unfurling mantis claw. It latched onto my ankle with a vice-like grip and used me to balance itself as it tried to get up. Moans escaped its hollow mouth as I screamed, as did everyone around me. I watched my friends bolt, leaving me to kick away my assailant. Finally, I broke free of his grasp. One kick shattered his remaining teeth like a dropped bijou. It stumbled back, almost falling over, but managed to catch itself. Once it was steady, it turned and looked at me with its dangling eye. I was broken out of my fear-induced trance when it lurched towards me. I turned and ran, needlessly scaling the rock behind me when I could have just ran around it. I jumped down on the other side and ran, until the pain in my ankle overwhelmed me. One signs of life were up ahead, and a quick turnaround told me that the body hadn't followed me. I stopped and inspected the source of the agony in my leg. Wrapping around my shin was a white rash in the loose shape of a handprint. Someone called my name, and my head shot up. Standing by a tree, just in front of me was Tyler. Behind him, a small crowd of concerned adults were moving slowly forward. Varying levels of belief on their faces correlated to who'd been told just about the discovery of a body and who heard it had moved. Still, even the disbelievers were driven forward by parental instincts and fatherly one-upmanship. Cautiously, myself and a few other children followed the adults back towards a rock. My heart was pounding, and my white rash burned like sulfur. Still, curiosity acted like an opioid as we returned to the large standing rock. I watched as a hefty, short-in-vest-wearing dad who already had a brutal sunburn tried to discreetly walk past the rock, next to the water's edge, and take a peep at the small inlet. The rest of our band watched as he crept around the corner, then screamed, stumbled backwards, and fell into the lake. His scream caused a chain reaction of similar screeching. There was a collective freeze as we all silently waited for anything to happen, but nothing did. No one staggered from behind rock, and, more worryingly, the man didn't get up. I noticed some of the adults looking at each other, wordlessly forming a plan. I saw that plan in motion when three of the equally sunburned men split off from our group and walked tentatively forward. Children were being consoled around me. But I wasn't a child. Not anymore. I was 13 for Christ's sake. I decided to follow the men. A few steps behind them, of course. But it still made me feel important. One, the taller man with noticeably the thickest head of hair, broke off from the pair to wander over to the man now lying face down in the shallow lake edge, calling his name reservedly as he went. I decided to follow him. He kicked off his flip-flops and took a few steps into water, crouching down by the fallen man. I crouched too, feeling the pain in my leg flare. Looking down at my shin gave me the same nauseous feeling as gazing over the edge of an eroding cliff. I could see that where the rash had been was now soft, puffy skin that didn't look quite connected to the tissue beneath it. My own bodily worries were torn aside when the tall man screamed. His friend lurched up from the water, his skin dripping like wax. All I could hear now was people screaming. The men in the water, the two beachgoers behind the rock, and, of course, myself. I hobbled back on my bad leg as I watched the rotting man in the lake fall forward, chasing his would-be aider. At the same time, the body from the small inlet ran mangled from behind the rocks, chasing after two of the parents. The body's hideous shriek, I soon realized, was a plea. "Kill me! Kill me!" he roared, his voice sounding like he was drowning in thick mud. Despite the bolt of pain that shot through me with every step, I found that fear suppressed most of it. As the two living monuments to decay gained on me, I realized I wasn't escaping, but running into more chaos. Finally, I burst from the tree line and into the commercial area. Before my eyes could even register the carnage in front of me, I smelled the blood. Its stench was overpowering. Noxious, it covered the grass and led out in a trail over the stones, sand, and white-painted wooden dock until finally it mixed with the lake water. Staring at the anomaly that coated the lake, it dawned on me that I was wrong earlier. The shimmer I saw wasn't just a dazzling reflection of the sun. It was a spectral shine that reminded me of a gas station puddle. It was like a tamed rainbow, dull from years of abuse, was being held captive just below the gentle waves. Black helicopters flocked overhead. As I gazed at the destruction this shimmer brought with it, dozens of people wandering the bank aimlessly, letting out animalistic cries as their body rotted. I saw a young mother cry as she held her quickly putrefying child. They were all still alive by some dark miracle, suffering through every second of it. Not too far from me, staggering between the deserted park benches, was a rotund man with an inflatable zebra pool ring still around his waist. He tore at his own face in agony, which came away from the skull like some extreme case of degloving. This scene, and similar, was being repeated all around me. Men, women, and children, all bearing the same affliction. It felt like a glimpse of hell. As I stared in debilitating disbelief, something suddenly pounced on me. I was knocked to the ground, turning onto my back as I fell. As soon as I was down, my assailant dove on top of me. It was the body from the inlet, now more of a skeleton, with a bare minimum amount of muscle and nerve tissue keeping him moving. He couldn't scream, couldn't speak. His larynx had dissolved from the looks of his neck. The remnants of his face were now inches from mine, and dripping a foul gunk onto me. His jaw bone swung open in an attempt to communicate. As it did, my hand finally felt what it had been searching for. I swung it around, bringing the stone down on the decomposing man's head. It splintered on impact, and he fell limp, slumping on top of me. With a heave, I pushed him off. His wasted body left a snail trail of flesh behind it. I didn't want to think of what was now coating my clothes. I stood and brushed bits of bone and sinew from me. Now firmly dead, the man had no bodily functions left to fight against the rot. And so his corpse, would it curl up like a dead spider, had begun to liquefy. Soon, he was a puddle on the grass among a once white shirt and rubber waders. After what felt like years suspended in shock, I felt agency return when I saw Tyler being attacked by one of the rotters, bloodied rock in hand. I began to run to his side, but stopped when I realized the decaying mass assaulting him was his mother. I stopped just a few yards away. For me, seeing someone I knew in that state was traumatizing. I couldn't fathom what it was like for Tyler. The distressed Tyler and his mother crumpled to the floor, His hands were around her putrid neck, trying to push her away. Even from where I was standing, I could see that she was crying. It was clear to me that she wasn't attacking him. Rather, she was trying to hug her son. I didn't know if Tyler had realized that yet, but I couldn't bear watching them any longer. Call me a coward, but I turned and ran. My bad leg carried me only a few steps further until I collapsed against a picnic table. I fell to my knees and crawled under the wooden shelter, curling up into a ball. Finally, I grimaced and looked at my wound. The puffy dead skin had rotten away, leaving a mass of bodily slime, yellow beads of fat and sinew. My milk-white shin bone poked proudly through the tissue. I whimpered when I saw the damage. The pain was already too much to bear, and it was only getting worse. My eyes were welded shut as I wept into my shoulder. When I opened them again, I wanted it to all be over. I wanted to be sitting bolt upright in bed, and for all this to have just been a terrible nightmare. I wanted the pain to stop, and when I felt an arm grab that back of my neck, I thought it soon would, just not in the way I hoped. I was dragged on my back out from under the picnic table. Staring from the grass up, I saw that my attacker wasn't one of the victims of decay, but a person in a formless black hazmat suit. I heard a muffled swear come from his rectangular helmet when I assumed he noticed my wound. The long metal cylinder he held in both hands shook with indecision. I watched as he looked up from me and around. I followed his gaze and saw his co-workers swarming the wharf, torching any rotting screamers they came across with the bulky flamethrowers hanging from their suits. I looked up at the man towering above me in fright. Once again his attention turned to me. The last thing I saw was him raising his weapon. I woke up in a hospital bed an unknowable amount of time later. As soon as I opened my eyes, my mother, who'd been sitting in the chair at the edge of my bed, sprang up and wrapped me in one of her affirming hugs, careful not to yank any of the tubes that ran in and out of me. A nurse soon appeared, beckoned by some hidden medical alarm. She first warned my mother that I was still in a fragile state. Then, she began to read a set of questions from her clipboard. I answered truthfully, explaining that other than a full bladder and a dull ache in my thigh, I wasn't in any discomfort. She then handed me her clipboard and a pen, instructed me to read to the terms and sign a now broken non-disclosure agreement. Seeing no reason why I shouldn't, I of course signed my name. If I'm being completely honest, which this post has been up until now, I thought it was something to do with the patient confidentiality thing I'd heard about in a medical drama. She took the page back and smiled stiffly. My ears felt like they were filling up with wax after hearing what she said next. I looked at my mother, who began to weep. I didn't believe the nurse, and swung back my blanket to triumphantly prove her wrong. My right leg had been amputated from well above the knee. The next hour was occupied with my mother and a new nurse trying to calm me down. This will be 15 years ago this summer. I don't live in my hometown anymore. No one does, not really. It wasn't just the lake that was affected. Anyone who drank tap water in that same time frame met a similar fate to the people who've been out swimming. I still don't fully know what happened. I have my theories, of course, but knew better than to voice them. Anytime I think about it, the black van parked across the street from my house would make me think otherwise. Until now. You see, since I started writing out my account, I've heard banging from my front door. And, oh God, I think I just heard it being broken down. Please, anyone who reads this, get my story out. Story 6. Something was in the water, and I think I know what. I have been thinking about posting this story for a while now, and recently I told my friend about it. They encouraged me to finally do it. So here I go. During the pandemic, my brother-in-law's private resort got rented out for a whole year by a group of Chinese nationals. They were building apartments nearby and needed a place for some of their workers to stay. They paid the full amount up front, moved in, and that was that. My brother-in-law never checked on them. But pretty early on, we noticed something strange. They covered every single glass window and door with boxes and random stuff, so no one could see inside. Fast forward to the end of their lease. The place was a wreck. Broken furniture, burned paintings, and garbage piled up like it had been abandoned for years. They paid for the damages, so we just shrugged it off and moved on. Since it was still the pandemic, my family decided to live there to save on rent. No guests were coming in anyway, so we stayed in the villa. I even had my own room, and that's when I noticed the smell. It was strongest in the villa. Sharp, rotten, metallic, with a sickly sweet note, almost fruity but in the worst possible way. It clung to the air, and I will never forget that smell. The water was worse. Foul, like something dead had been sitting in it. I refused to gargle with it, and would walk to a bathroom far from the villa, just to wash my face or brush my teeth. Soon I couldn't eat meat, especially pork, because the smell made me gag. I'm pretty sure my mom used the tap water for cooking, and the thought alone made me nauseous. I figured maybe I was being dramatic until I told my younger brother. He said he smelled it too and also felt weird eating meat at the villa, but he just brushed it off. I can't believe how they could just ignore the smell. The weird part was when I eat at the resort's restaurant, which had its own water supply, or whenever we eat outside or order from other restaurants, I was fine. No smell, no nausea about meats. But when the meat was cooked at the villa, it was instant. I just can't take it, even if I tried eating with my nose covered. The smell was everywhere, especially in the indoor pool area near the water tank. Sometimes at night, when I turned on the sink in my bathroom, the stench would hit me so hard it made me puke. We lived there for about a year before moving out. I thought that was the end of it. Then, years later, I saw the news. Pogo operations are getting raided left and right. One of the biggest stories was about Alaskwa, the mayor of a nearby province. Turns out, the building those Chinese tenants had been working on got raided too. They were part of Pogo, and bodies have been found in the area. That's when my sister told me the kicker. The woman who rented the villa for my brother-in-law was Alaskwa's sister, and suddenly everything made sense. No one ever checked the villa properly after they left. No major renovation, no inspection. And I still wonder, was someone killed there, buried nearby? Or worse, was something in the water we drank every single day? I don't know, and honestly, I don't think I ever want to. P.S. If you're not familiar with the issues of Bort Pogo, Philippine offshore gaming operators, POGOs, online scams, fraud, human trafficking, and other criminal activities were uncovered in a series of government raids on several Pogo hubs. Story 7. Some of the people aren't real. They unwind into creatures of malice. I've begun noticing things recently. Odd things. Not quite horrific, but disturbing all the same. I precisely remember the first instance of the bizarre string of happenings, which would soon lead me to question the very reality in which I find myself. There can be no doubt about that. It was when I, in my foolishness, decided to follow up on the age-old adage of making eye contact with strangers as a way of warming oneself back up toward society. I'm something of a habitual hermit. I live in cycles of brief and inhumanely hard labor, followed by a rather indulgent withdrawal from society once I've gathered enough funds. You'd be surprised how easy it is to implement, so long as you're ready to bear 14-hour workdays and an ascetic lifestyle during the hermit season. It's not particularly important for what I'm about to transcribe, aside from maybe if you were to use it as means by which to question my sanity, which I uphold, is not in danger of falling on itself, as odd as my routine may be. It had been 3 months, 2 weeks, and 1 day into my hermitage when the incident occurred. It happened during a routine supply run to one of the rundown corner stores in the area. My funds were beginning to run dry, and so I began to ease myself back into the despised cycle of social interaction, as I've always done. Except this time, when I lifted my gaze from the tips of my shoes and towards a disheveled man standing next in line to me, something rather unexpected had happened. When I met his gaze, instead of a blank and glossy expression I've so expected, an impossible reflection stared back at me, deep within what I now doubt were his eyes. It was a sight I have never seen before, in fiction or nature. Inside of the man's eyeball was a nonsensical infinity. It had taken in the light reflecting itself off of the environment and twisted it into a mess of ever-shifting shapes. They moved in a manner that I was sure not even the most bizarre of celestial bodies and oddities of physics could produce. Looking into the eyes of his eye felt primordial fear, the kind that has almost been bred out of the human populace as civilization triumphed over the night. It reminded me of the feeling a child particularly dependent on their parents may feel when its caretakers leave briefly and fail to inform a child of the temporary nature of their departure. Pure and unbridled fear, coupled with an overwhelming failure to comprehend. All the accompanying physical responses to terror followed suit. I was trembling, sweating bullets into my cheap wife beater of a shirt. My heart was running millions of paces a second, and yet I couldn't take my gaze off the stranger's impossible eyes. For some people, this might have been a reason to question whether or not they're going through some sort of episode, be it mental or medical. I must admit, I was on the verge of doing so myself, until I looked down into the man's shopping basket. It was filled with the following: 1 bottle of 100 milliliters of liquor broken, for packets of over-counter painkillers, intact; 1 packet of an off-brand Viagra, intact; more than 20 packs of chewing gum, various flavors; 6 packs of tinfoil wrapping, intact; 1 paper towel, intact; 1 can of Coke, open and spilling onto all of the above, alongside the mess of things he was actively stuffing in there from the shelves closest to the cashier, his movements automatic and independent of his gaze, which was still locked onto my own. I was familiar with the layout of the shop as I frequented it often, and concluded that it's the kind of assortment one would get if they were just mindlessly roaming the store and grabbing around at whatever may lie at their fingertips. This suspicion was confirmed as quickly as it had been had, seeing as the stranger was still yet stuffing more and more of the store's assortment into his already overflowing basket. Now, I understand that the man might seem like just your average drug-addled pilgrim, out and about untowards a destination known only to himself and God. To that I say, 1, drugs are not common in the area this had taken place in, and 2, you hadn't seen the sheer impossibility of his gaze. It's not something any substance I've ever known it could cause. Betraying the rational part of my mind and risking a likely stabbing, I called out toward the shambling man. Cue quite the assortment you got there. What's the big occasion, huh? The sound of my own voice scared me almost as much as a man's facsimile of a face, now contorted into a specter of confusion. Yes, he responded, feigning understanding, still keeping his eyeballs that couldn't be locked onto me. Say, that bottle in your basket's leaking. Seems like a waste, I think. You sure you want to buy that one? Internally, I begged the stranger, God, the spirit of the world, and any who would listen, for the man to betray some sign of humanity at last. No, he said, tilting his head to the side under an angle which bordered it inhuman. So, are you going to exchange it for another? No, he said, but you just said you don't want that one, so which one is it? What do you mean? And what the hell is wrong with your eyes? Yes, he said, same exact intonation as the first time I've ever heard him speak. As soon as my piqued interest left the man's immediate concern, he went off to get his groceries processed. I stayed and observed. He spoke not a word, and when informed of the price he'd have to pay for all of them, the man had stared off into the horizon and stood there, swaying for an uncomfortably long while before marching out. I followed suit, but the man was nowhere to be seen, as if though he vanished upon stepping outside of the corner store's domain. In the days to come, I began to notice more and more people with eyes just like his. They seemed to follow me everywhere I went, and all of them had the same mixture of an absent mind and an aura of danger as the man I've observed that day. That's when I chose to extend my hermitage for another month, in order to better understand whatever it is they were. It would be impossible to convey just how much it felt like I was being stalked in a brief message, so I will instead lay out all the happenstances involving the odd-eyed people that I had noticed and can recall aptly, opting to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. I've taken this as further means of preparing myself for the work cycle to come. My methodology was as follows. I would go out and wander the town, keeping my eyes peeled for anything out of the ordinary. It wasn't long until I spotted another odd-eyed person. The second day of my hunt, while quietly strolling through the city under the hot midday sun, I witnessed a laborer high up on a ladder, utility vest on, but no helmet covering up his battling bulbous head. He was doing something with a fiber optic cable box mounted on a utility pole, and the company car was nowhere to be seen. He stuck out immediately, taking his unfocused and impossible gaze from the cable box in hand, and locking it onto me immediately, as soon as he could see me pass through. His eyes were exactly as the ones I've seen before, lodged in the homeless man's fake-out face. Immediately it stuck out to me, that same as the previous odd-eyed person. The fiber optic worker didn't seem capable of true understanding, and his apparent position in society was nothing more than an empty shell meant OT conceals something brittle and dangerous. For one, the company car was nowhere to be seen. Am I to believe he was just lugging the ladder around all on his own, throughout God only knows how many kilometers of infrastructure? And on that point, it was completely and utterly illegal to even be that high up on your own without another person securing the ladder. I had worked in that industry briefly, and the management, while crooked in their own right, would have never allowed something like this. It wasn't conclusive evidence of inhumanity, but it was something to note. I opted to keep walking at a slow pace and see if he'd follow. As soon as I made it almost out of his view and around a nearby corner, he attempted to walk on air to get near me. The ladder fell out of position, dragging him with it. His left leg locked itself against one of the ladder rungs, making it so that he fell first, hitting the ground face on, before being slammed with the full weight and impetus of the falling ladder. He never stopped to process the pain this injury would have caused any sane man. Instead, he attempted to get out from underneath the ladder immediately after the impact. He did so without clear understanding of the mechanics of gravity, and forgetting the fact that his now bent leg was still wrapped around one of the rungs. After a bit, he managed to get off, and without a pause began to limp towards me. Fearing direct confrontation with a possibly agitated pretender of a person, I sprinted away in panic. Once out of breath, and out of the sight of that horrid being, I've opted to return home for the day. I was seriously spooked. Needless to say, the experience had made me even more paranoid than I was previously. Unfortunately, it confirmed several of my fears. It meant that whatever the homeless man was, there were more of them. Furthermore, they knew that I knew of their existence, and they had taken interest in me, possibly because of it. While the corner store encounter might have been experienced away as a meeting with a fry-out junkie, this happening was far more odd and consistent with what I've seen of the first man. One is an accident, two is a coincidence, and it wouldn't be long until I saw the third. After having regained my stamina, I broke into a half-jog and made my way on toward my car. About halfway through, I was stopped dead in my tracks by a mother and her stroller-seated brat. She had blocked my way almost intentionally. In my mind, I was prepared to fight for my life, adrenaline soaring through to the point I felt both faint and manic at the same time. When I inspected the woman, her eyes were normal. I still worried because of the way she seemingly stopped me dead in my tracks. She was wearing a weather appropriate sundress and a hat which nicely complemented her shapely face. She was a sparking image of the everyday woman, the embodiment of everything the world should be filled with, and a welcome change of pace to the odd-eyed freaks I was so preoccupied with recently. While gathering the wits to jog around her, apologized for almost crashing into her child or backing out entirely. It hit me. I hadn't even think to look over the child. It was sleeping and its eyes were closed. I remember my own childhood, dozing off in the stroller as me and my mother passed on to a pleasant neighborhood. Because of its comfortable nap, I couldn't possibly inspect the eyes. The rules were unclear. Both of the previous odd-eyed beings were pretending to be middle-aged males, but why should there be an age limit to their trickery? The fiber optic man was able to hold down a job. Seemingly, at the very least, he wore company clothing. Could they spontaneously take over and wear the skin of unsuspecting folk? Or were they born in a hole somewhere in full disguise, ready to descend onto civilization? If it was the former, the child couldn't be trusted. Taking my chances, I yelled at it. It was an ugly, adrenaline-fueled, and an almost primal yelp. I let it go on for far longer than I intended to, and by the end of it my vocal cords ached and I became breathless. I immediately hated myself for my paranoia, and even more so for having been wrong. The child awoke, and its eyes were nothing like the ones donned by the gazers. It was nothing but a sweet infant, a shook by the shouts of a madman. I felt a mix of guilt and shame wash over me as the woman jumped in to defend her child. What the hell is wrong with you, you creep? Get the hell away from my baby. I'm as sorry. It's just that some of the people aren't people, and your child had its eyes closed, and I just had to check Dash. I attempted to defend my stance, still in use of the sound of my own voice. When I saw her taking out her phone, assumedly to call the authorities, I decided to call it quits and retreat home. I jogged past her, switching to a sprint during the last quarter of the way. As soon as I reached my car, I floored it, likely violating many speed limitations, and headed on home. That night, I slept little. I busied myself fighting over what's true. Had I been wrong about all of this? Or just a child? I reasoned that if I accurately witnessed reality to my disadvantage, then there was no reason to doubt it in the instances it came to benefit me. I was not delusional. I just jumped to conclusions seeing the child. They were real, and they were a threat to me. In the days to come, I would be proven right in my assessment, as I spied many more gazers. A municipal worker lifted up a manhole cover without the use of tools, staring daggers into the now open sewer hole, before dropping the manhole cover onto his foot as soon as he saw me, in a perfectly vertical position. The 50-kilogram cover slid into his flesh, separating it from the rest of his body at the midfoot. Sound of crunching bone and glass being broken followed. The man kept his gaze dead centered on me, before looking at his now mutilated foot and calmly stating, a shitty wage. He kept watching me, and his gaping foothole failed to spill forth blood. I left. When I came back 3 hours later, he wasn't there. I grabbed a sliced part of his foot for proof and stored it in a zip bag inside of my glove box compartment. Then, there was a woman who couldn't understand door locks and so opted to crawl out through a window instead, from the second floor of an apartment complex. She was overweight, and the plop of fat I had heard as she hit the ground was the only real thing about her. I had almost gotten used to seeing them by that point. The gazers hadn't yet done anything outwardly malicious yet. They appeared to be as curious of me as I was of them. If they were some sort of parasitic being, surely they would opt to feast on scraps and tidbits of food ever present throughout all of civilization and guarded by none, right? This naive belief was squashed on the second week of my observation. A street performer sat on the corner, badly bumbling his way through some song I'm sure he must have made up on the spot. He wore sunglasses, and thus I couldn't have clocked him immediately as a gazer. The second I carelessly let myself walk within, say, 10 meters of him, he let the guitar fall out of his hands and immediately jolted to sprint at me. I sat there frozen for a split second before breaking into a desperate run, aiming to escape the now apparent threat. I was screaming for help all the way through, hoping desperately that someone would hear me and at least observe as this unnatural being harmed me in a way previously unseen by nature and man. He almost caught up to me, the tips of his fingers brushing against my back. I felt a stinging pain in places too great in number to count. The hurt gave me enough energy to shake him off for a bit. I continued to desperately yelp for help as I ran. Thankfully, a pair of police officers enjoying snacks from a cafe up ahead have heard the commotion, not knowing who the perpetrator is. In spite of how clear I've made it with my sobs and yells, that tackled both of us. At that we went limp in fear and bewilderment, both me and the gazer united as man and monster, if only for a brief stint. I remained quiet, and he began cycling through words. Musik, he pleaded his case. Manuai, hat. He attempted to explain and get the authorities to see it his way. I remained silent in a shook before one of the officers, the taller of the group, forced me up and asked me to explain the situation. Sir, my name is Officer Bradley. We'd like you to explain what happened here. Has this man tried to mug you or something like that? Would you like to press charges? It's a bit hard to explain, officer. I'm afraid that if I told you the truth, I'd be seen as a madman. I'm going to need you to try your best, regardless of how loony it might sound. But trust me, we've heard some weird stuff over the years. There's how should I put this? There's a group of creatures, People, they have it out for me. I don't know why. They've been observing me. This is the first time I've been hurt by one of them. Huh, Dash. Well, can't say that sounds like something a sane man would say, but you seem lucid enough. We'll make a note of that. Would you like to press charges? We'll need you to come by the precinct for a statement if S. W, what the hell? The now cuffed musician began shaking on the ground. Wireless repeating various phrases he must have inferred over however long he was around pretending for. And mon, H-E dash, he attempted to relay, as he was spitting out copious amounts of blood. I think I thinned strips of stomach lining come up alongside it as I've watched. I couldn't be too sure. Officer Bradley shouted to his partner to call for an ambulance as he began administering first aid. It wasn't long before the musician perished, and yet his eyes remained the same puzzling enigma of ever-reflecting prisms. In my heart of hearts, I didn't believe he was dead, not the part of him that mattered. Anyway, after I declined medical aid, the police took my contact information and set me on my way. They said they'd contact me if it was ever prudent to do so. My wound stung, but I didn't think them to be serious. They were, however, wholly unusual. Once I've arrived home, I'd inspected them under a mirror, which was no easy task seeing as the brunt of them resided on my back. It was cacophony of slashes, each differing in angle and the depth. A few barely grazed me, but the majority dug deep into the skin. The musician didn't have a weapon on him. I was sure of that. My mind began running through possibilities. It was a matter of survival now. If I had any hope of living through Dash, whatever this crisis was, I had to at least understand the principles under which it operated. Again and again, I ran into a brick wall while trying to explain the nature of my injuries. Could it have been fingernails? No, the cuts ran too deep. Could he have had a weapon on him after all? That wasn't it either. I hadn't seen anything on him the whole time he was being handled by the cops. It must have been something used by whatever being was in control of these facsimilies of humans. Their claws and teeth, I still thought of them as animals, an undiscovered parasitic species. Maybe, but still one that had to adhere to laws of physics. Is there such a thing in nature as an invisible claw or an imperceptible stinger? Then again, my back was turned on the musician as he inflicted these wounds. Frustrated, scared, anxious, and angry, I decided to cut my oh-so-enlightening brainstorm short. I drank to calm my nerves. It doesn't matter what brand of liquor, but I'll say this, it was strong, and I've had more than I should have given the situation. I laid in the bed, appreciating the way liquor made my eardrums ring. I failed to stop my mind from trying to come up with an answer to the injuries I faced. Little did know, I would find out their inner workings in the morning, midway through a siege of gazers. Story 8. I used to rob houses until the night that the house robbed me. I used to be a professional criminal. My specialty was home invasions. Get in, get the goods, get out. Now, I'm not going to pretend to be a good guy, or like I made good life choices in the past. I also don't want to glorify or romanticize what I used to do. What I do want to do is tell people this story because it has haunted me for so many years, and I don't know how much longer I can go on with this guilt. That night, there were 4 of us, Juan, Marcus, Tanner, and myself. Our target was a single-story house, a real easy in and out job. We had scoped it out for days and had everything planned out, but when we pulled up, the TV was on and someone was home. We should have called a night right there. Instead, Marcus spotted a different house. No car, no lights, he said. Better pick. I didn't like it. I felt in my gut that we needed to call a night. I remember clearly saying, "Nah, this one's not right. Let's get out of here and regroup." "Look, I'm down bad." One muttered, "I'm with Marcus. Let's do this shit." Marcus playfully slapped my shoulder, and I nodded. We always looked out for one another and hit jobs when someone was down and needed money. That night was no different in that aspect. Tanner turned the wheel, and off we went. We pulled up and creeped toward the back of the house and slipped in the back door with minimal effort. One had barely touched the lock before it clicked. Dude was a wizard at that shit. First thing we noticed was how fucking cold the house was, and then came the odor. The air carried a sour copper tang. Faint at first, but growing as we moved. As we moved through the house, we all started looking through everything we could find, but just as Tanner had pulled the last drawer open in the living room, we heard the front door click open. Marcus froze with his mouth half open, and Tanner mouthed a slow, deliberate fuck. Juan then nodded his head toward the stairs, and we all creeped for the staircase, try and make our boots silent. I could hear the door downstairs shut, the click of the lock, and by the time we reached the top, I knew whoever had come in wasn't leaving. The hallway stretched long ahead. There was a dim yellow light bleeding from a single bulb, and we could make out that there were 6 closed doors. Juan went first, trying near his bedroom. Inside was a sheetless bed, a single shoe in the middle of the floor, but nothing else. "Clear," he muttered. But from below came the slow, deliberate sound of shoes on wood, like a reminder that we needed to get the fuck out of there. Marcus opened the second door. It was clearly the bathroom. The mirror was shattered with glass in the sink. I ripped the shower curtain back, but there was nothing. Tanner then opened the third door, and as soon as it did, the smell hit before any sight. It was what I could best describe as metallic and wet. Inside, there was a man slumped against the wall. His wrists were bound with tape, and his head was bent at an unnatural angle. Marcus gagged. Tanner let out a whispered, "Fuck, fuck, fuck." But Juan, with a tremor in his voice, said, "Keep moving." At this point, we were all freaking the fuck out and trying to get through this house of horrors. The steps downstairs stopped, and there was a moment of silence. Then, just as quick as the silence had come, we heard one heavy, dragging creak of the first stair. I rushed to open the fourth door, which was obviously a child's room. It had peeling wallpaper with cartoon bears. And then I noticed something small under the covers. I stopped in my tracks, my mind already knowing what it was, but Marcus stepped forward, pulled the blanket back, and then staggered away, before puking everywhere. We could hear more steps on the stairs, and they were much closer now. What followed his steps sounded like a weird thud. One rushed to the fifth door, and inside was a woman tied to a chair. Her throat had been slit so deep it was a miracle her head was even attached. We all ran for the last room, and the smell was at its strongest. Sour rot mixed with the iron tang of fresh blood. Tanner's hands shook as he reached the last door at the end of the hall. This one had a newer lock and fresher paint. The footsteps behind us began again, slower, heavier, and still followed by a large thud. Juan pushed Tanner aside and kicked the door open. In an instant, the stench slammed into us. There were 3 bodies, 2 crumpled on the floor, 1 hanging from a rope in the ceiling beam, all in different stages of decay. They all looked to be teenage girls. Then came another large step, followed by a large thud, and we knew he was at the top of the stairs. "Window!" I shouted. We ran to it, but it was painted shut. Marcus began slamming his shoulder into the frame over and over until it was finally broke enough to open. Tanner went first, then Marcus. One shoved me forward to the window and out onto the roof of the house. As I landed and stood up, I turned back just long enough to see him. He was halfway down the hall, tall and broad, face hidden in shadow, moving with a slow, deliberate, no fucks given type of attitude. Then I realized he was dragging a woman by her hair. Her mouth was taped shut, and she made eye contact with me. I yanked Juan through, and we all jumped to the ground, landing hard. We all ran as soon as we got up, not looking back until the house was a shadow behind us. We couldn't call the police without getting ourselves in trouble, so we just left it. Problem is, guilt doesn't just leave. We've all lived with regret from that point forward. Marcus ended up in prison, and eventually died from a stab wound while out on the prison yard. Juan was out drunk driving and crashed into a tree in his life right then and there. Then there's Tanner. He got hooked on drugs and ended up hanging himself in his own garage. So here I am, the last survivor and the only one who knows the truth. I needed to get this out there, and I needed to unleash this truth from my heavy heart. I so badly wish we didn't hit that house that night, and I wish we could have saved that girl. I hate the images I'm haunted by from what that monster did to those people. I don't think I can live with this guilt any longer. That night robbed me of my friends, my sanity, and my will to live. So this is my confession, and likely my goodbye. Story 9. Something took my cousin's dead body from under the skate ramp. Boy, nice nails, gay boy. The little kid in a blue hoodie shouted at me from across the road. He had a small freckled face and red hair peeking out from his hood. Your mum shags for milk tokens, you little ginger chav. I yelled back, flashing my 2 fingers at him. There was a pause between us while we stared at each other from either side of the road, before the kid ran across it, narrowly avoiding being run over by a motorbike. The kid was my cousin, Logan. He stood in front of me with an impish, eager grin. You're not meant to be out this late, kid. I gestured to the dark, starless sky above as we stood under the dim, yellowy light of the street lamp. Says who? He replied haughtily. I scoffed. Air says me, you're not my father. So you can't tell me what to do. I can. Yeah, right. He rolled his eyes and smiled up at me. Don't worry, I'm only going to walk Maisie back from the park. His tone softened now that our bit was over. He had his head held up high, clearly proud to tell me about this girl. I knew Maisie. She always helped me tidy up at the end of youth club at the local church on Wednesdays. I'm not religious. I just help out because my friend asked me to. Oh, I taunted him and gave him a little shove. Laugh at me all you want. You're just jealous. Maybe if you can go around dressed like a gay emo, you'd have a girlfriend as well. He had a point there, I can't lie. Oh, I didn't realize she was your girlfriend. I opened my wallet and handed him a $5. Take her somewhere nice, like the corner shop that has a bakery section in it or something. Ha, you laugh, but she'd love that. She really likes donuts. Thanks, Chris. He shoved the $5 haphazardly into his pocket, then saluted me goodbye. Then he turned away from me. I watched him put his hands in his pockets the way older boys did. I assumed it was an attempt to look intimidating, but no 12-year-old can really look intimidating, even if that 12-year-old is taller than average, even if they were the tallest in their class. A fact he loved to point out. See you later, Logan. I called after him. He waved again without turning around. Then I watched him disappear around the corner of a decaying garden fence. And in an instant, he was out of my life forever. I should have gone with him. I don't know why I didn't. I feel like it's sort of a universal feeling that you hate the version of yourself that existed in the near past. The version of you that made shitty decisions that the current you make no sense. Instead of walking my cousin and his little girlfriend home, I went to go check on Logan's mom, my Auntie Amber, who, contrary to my previous jibe, does not and never has engaged in sex work in exchange for tokens provided by the government's Healthy Start initiative that can be exchanged for milk. She will, however, according to local legend, shag for half a gram, hence the nickname Half a Gram AM. Logan usually stayed out if there was a man at home he didn't like, or a new one he didn't know yet, hence why I went to check in. I love Auntie Amber anyway. She wasn't a bad mom to Logan, not really. I liked going to her house because it was always clean and tidy. Even if the place was decorated in silver plush velvet and English Bulldog AI-generated posters, it was tidy, warm, and smelled nice. Unlike my house, where we never had the heating on, and my 3 siblings were always making a mess as they moved like a whirlwind through the house. I swear my mom followed the kids around all day with a bottle of Aldi's own surface cleaner and a rag, and yet the house was always a tip. And yes, I did help out when I wasn't at work. Oh, hello, love. Auntie Amber greeted me at the door in her matching baby pink pajama set and robe. You got anyone over tonight? I asked her, trying to peek into the front room behind her. Oh, just Derek. Why? She said the name as if I'd have a single clue who Derek was. Just didn't want to intrude. Oh, you never intrude, darling, go sit down. She ushered me inside and guided me to the living room. The floral scent of her plug-in air freshener was a divine reprieve from the stale air outside. Auntie Amber made me a tea, and I sat down on her sofa next to the shirtless young man. She went through boyfriends quicker than loo rolls, so I didn't bother to get to know him much. All right, mate. I nodded to him, exchanging the usual pleasantries. Yeah, you? Yeah, I'm all right. Bit hot today, innit? Bloody boiling. Evidently. I gestured to his shirtlessness. What brings you here, then? Not that I'm not always delighted to see my lovely, successful nephew. She smiled brightly while she set a cup of tea in front of me, then took a seat in her chair across from me and the shirtless man. Well, I saw Logan wandering around. Just thought I'd let you know and see how you were. Oh, he's all right. He's a big boy now. Well, he's still only 12, Amber. I reminded her as I took a sip of my tea, which was clearly a fancy name brand tea like Tetley or PG Tips. He's all right. He's at his phone if he needs me. She assured me as she got up from her chair and began milling around the room, straightening things up. She always had a hard time sitting still. Have you got yours on you? I asked her. Yeah, it's upstairs charging. Right. Reluctantly, I stayed with her for a bit longer, letting her tell me about how well her eyebrow threading business was doing. It was doing well, I must admit. She did have a talent for that sort of work. Delicate fine work like eyebrow threading always suited her. Logan inherited those fine skills and always drew the most detailed little pictures you've ever seen. He wanted to be a tattoo artist when he grew up. I promised to buy him a tattoo gun and practice on me when he was 16. I care very little for the quality of my tattoos. Auntie Amber was also a fantastic nail and makeup artist as well. I always had her do my nails. Want a touch-up? She asked, looking down at my chipped black nail polish. Yes, please. I can't pay you today, though. You never have to pay me. I let her paint my nails. As I watched her focus on the fine details of nail painting, I thought about how Logan made the same face when he concentrated. I knew because I helped him study for his tests. When my nails were painted and dried, I decided to walk round to the park to mess around on my skateboard. It was very late, but I liked it better when I was sure there were no little kids around. I didn't expect Logan to still be there, as it had been about an hour since I last saw him. In my imagination, he was at this girl's house, or he was walking back from hers after having a sweet moment together at the park. Although I did think we might run into each other, and was a bit disappointed when we didn't. Walking around my area at night is always depressing, but that night felt a little extra miserable. This wasn't the place to be a kid. I stopped on top of the bridge over the train tracks of the station and peered over the graffiti-covered railings. Imagine, if you will, trying to think about the future and all its possibilities when all that you can see around you is empty little fields of plain overgrown grass, crumbling tower blocks, and the dirty Thames River. Although I must say the view off of our local pier into the Thames used to be quite nice until they built an Amazon warehouse on the other side. That's the view now. Big, stupid, ugly modern warehouse, like the one I work in. I walked over to the other side of the bridge, then I crossed the road and entered the field that the park sat in the middle of, vaguely lit by street lamps. The ramps are the only actual piece of equipment that's still usable. People's pit bulls have torn the rubber off of the swing and the zip line, and the big slide is apparently the designated park toilet. Despite there being trees at the edge of the field, they still piss and slide. Wrong UNS. The skate ramps are the only part of the park that's lit up at night by the same poorly maintained street lamps dotted around my area. They give a light that's shit for deterring crime, but great for taking aesthetic pictures. If you can't tell, I'm delaying having to tell the next part via over-describing my area to you. I should have known something was wrong from the feeling in the air alone. It felt still and empty. Usually the park is full of sound at any time. It's usually birds and bugs making their noises, especially the crickets in the high grass in summer. But it was silent that night. I put my skateboard down on the floor and began skating back and forth. I went up the quarter pipe, then back down to the little ramp and up the big one at the other end. I did it over and over as I had done for about a decade by that point. The only sound in my ears was the rumbling of my wheels on the smooth ramp and the not-so-smooth concrete. I would have had earphones in, but I didn't have any data on my phone. Taking a break, I stopped on the little ramp for a second and took a seat on the rail. As I looked around, I spotted a new piece of graffiti on the quarter pipe. Someone had drawn a green, spindly plant with white little berries on it. I had seen several similar pieces of graffiti around recently. It's always cool when a new artist tags your area. As I was staring at the details, I saw movement from the corner of my eye, a shadow flitting past. At first I thought it was a fox, I looked in the direction it came from in hopes of seeing one. I stared out into the dark, empty field, looking for a flash of red fur. Then I heard a bang from under the big ramp, which made me jump. My head whipped in the direction of the noise. I got up and walked toward the sound. I thought I heard some whispers as I got closer. I attributed them to maybe some crackheads or homeless people, or homeless crackheads. I wasn't too worried either way, as I know a lot of the crackheads, homeless people, and homeless crackheads in my area. I'm related to one of them. I saw another shadow flit off into the dark. It went too fast for me to make out a shape. My mind changed to thinking of animals again. Perhaps there was a small family of foxes feasting on an abandoned kebab under the ramp or something. I'm stalling again, but these ramps are known for their big gaps underneath. As a teenager, I smoked under them all the time. I know people who lost their virginities under them, and homeless people who camp in them regularly. The space under them really isn't that big, but it's plenty if you need a place to camp out. I've hidden from the rain in them with girls I've fancied and refused to leave the park for even though it was pissing down. And when I was much smaller, I played pretend games under them with my mates. We liked pretending it was a castle, and the ramp above was the battlements. It's impressive what a space can be to a child. Never did I imagine that the ramp would become a mausoleum for my little cousin and his girlfriend. As the underside of the big ramp came into view, I saw their feet, small and upturned, a pair of trainers and a pair of flats next to each other. My eyes scanned the scene in silent, abject horror as I took in the sight of their little bodies. They laid side by side, pale and lifeless, their hands almost touching but not quite. Upon seeing my cousin laying there, I screamed. Scream isn't quite the right word. It was a guttural noise that I had no idea I was capable of making. It came from the pit of my stomach and tore my throat up on the way out. I stood there frozen, my entire being in pure screaming panic before I finally found the strength to look away. I took out my phone and made the most pathetic, incoherent phone call 999 has ever heard. They told me to turn back and go double check if either of them were still alive. I did so. The sight which greeted me was even worse than the first. I made that same guttural scream again, this time down the phone, which I promptly dropped as I scanned my surroundings. Logan's body was gone. I ran around the perimeter of the ramps, desperately looking for someone with the body of a boy in their arms. The park stayed silent. I ran into the abyss of the field searching for him, tears streaming down my face, so much I couldn't see. Then I suddenly remembered that I was supposed to be checking if Maisie was alive. I sprinted back, adrenaline sending me faster on my feet than I had ever gone before. I dipped down next to her and grabbed my phone from the floor. In a ramble of words I couldn't keep track of, I told the lady my cousin's body had gone, and also to tell me how to check if Maisie was alive simultaneously. That threw her, but props to her for figuring me out and managing to talk me through it all. Okay, Chris, I need to place your index finger and your middle finger on the side of Maisie's neck, next to her windpipe. The polite lady's voice on the phone instructed. Okay. I replied back in a whimper. With hands I could barely keep steady, I brought my fingers to Maisie's neck. I did as told, applying enough pressure to bruise her, but not a single beat came from Maisie's blood flow. Her heart had stopped. The girl's body was drained of all the life it once possessed. As I felt around desperately for a pulse, I saw what I thought were two moles on the side of her neck. They were perfectly placed parallel to each other and a few cm apart. I pressed around near them and noticed something that made the stillness in the air feel like it made sense. Horrified, I gasped as the moles began to ooze thick red blood. I choked on another sob. Upon Maisie's little pale neck were two canine-shaped puncture wounds. They looked painful. Suddenly, the area under the ramp was flooded with light from police cars. It blinded me for a second. As my eyes adjusted to the new fluorescent lights in my face, I looked out toward the police cars and ambulance and the personnel marching towards me. There was something behind them. I wiped the tears from my eyes and looked out to the car park. At the far end, standing under a fading and flickering street lamp, were three black shadows. Their features were obscured by dim light and distance, but I saw their eerily still snarling grins. The tallest shadow held a body in his arms. A small body with a tuft of curly red hair peeking out from under a hood. My arm shot out and pointed at the figures. There, he's over there. I yelled. 2 officers turned and bolted in the direction, but in the split second it took them to turn, the 3 figures disappeared in a blur shadow. I got up to sprint after them, but 2 officers grabbed me. Although my entire body was shaking with adrenaline, I somehow managed to tell myself the police had it under control. My instincts told me otherwise. I sort of wish I hadn't ignored them. Instead, I cooperated and let them guide me over to a cold metal bench. As first responders walked past with Maisie's body on a stretcher, I instinctively went to grab her hand. Something fell from it and slowly floated down to the ground. Confused, I looked down at the grass beneath me. Between my feet was a business card. Curiously, I picked it up and turned it over. On it was an illustration of the same plant that had been spray painted on the ramp. Green stems, white bulbs. Story 10. The reflection I see in the gym mirror is stronger and more muscular than I am. The problem is, he's getting stronger while I'm getting weaker. I'm writing this from my living room couch, where I've been for the last 2 days. The door to my bathroom is closed, and I've hung a towel over the knob. I know it's stupid. It won't do anything, but it's the only thing I can think of to do. I'm afraid to go in there. I'm afraid to look in the mirror, because I know who I'll see. And it won't be me. Not the real me. Anyway, this all started about 6 months ago. I was, for lack of a better word, average. Average height, average build. Working an average desk job that was slowly but surely turning my spine into a question mark. I wasn't unhappy, just static. I decided I needed a change. So I joined a gym. It was one of those 24/7 places. Nothing fancy. It had that familiar, specific smell of rubber mats, disinfectant, and faint metallic sweat. The equipment was a bit old, the lighting a bit harsh, but it had everything you needed. I wasn't trying to become a bodybuilder. I just wanted to feel a little healthier, a little stronger. My routine was simple. I'd go twice a week after work. I'd do my workout, listen to my podcasts, maybe have a brief, head-nodding conversation with one of the regulars. And at the end of every session, I'd do what every single person who has ever lifted a weight does. I'd stand in front of the giant, wall-sized mirror and check my progress. It's a little vain, I know, but it's part of the ritual. You flex, you turn, you see the small changes. A little more definition in the shoulders, a bit more shape to your arms. It's a quiet moment of self-congratulation before you head home. The first time I noticed something was off, I dismissed it instantly. I just finished a tough workout, and I was standing in front of the mirror, catching my breath. And I thought, the lighting in here is really good. I looked better, not just pumped from the workout, but fuller. My shoulders seemed broader, my chest thicker. It was a subtle difference, the kind you could easily attribute to a flattering angle or a trick of the light. I felt a small thrill of satisfaction, took a quick picture with my phone to compare later, and went home, back in my apartment. I checked the picture, then looked in my own bathroom mirror. The effect was gone. In the harsh, overhead light of my bathroom, I just looked like me again. Tired, a little flushed from the workout, but decidedly average. The impressive figure from the gym mirror was gone. Must be the lighting. I muttered to myself and forgot about it. A week later, I was back at the gym. I finished my routine and went to the mirror for the ritual. And there he was again, the better me. But this time, the difference was more pronounced. It wasn't just lighting. The reflection staring back at me was genuinely more muscular. The lines of his abdomen were deeper. The curve of his bicep was sharper. He looked like me, but like a version of me that had been working out consistently for a year, not just a few weeks. A cold, strange feeling prickled at the back of my neck, but it was quickly washed away by a wave of pride. Whatever was happening, it was working. I was making progress. This is where the obsession began. The image in that mirror became my motivation. It was a promise of what I could become. I started going to the gym 3 times a week, then 4. Soon, I was there every single day, chasing the man in the mirror. I'd push myself to the absolute limit, my muscles screaming, my lungs burning, all for that final moment of validation when I'd stand before the mirror and see him. And every time he was better, stronger, more defined. He was becoming a work of art, a Greek statue carved from my flesh and by my hands. But a strange, terrifying disconnect started to happen. While the reflection was getting stronger, I was getting weaker. At first, I told myself it was just overtraining. Of course I was tired. I was at the gym 7 days a week. But it was more than that. It was a deep, draining fatigue that settled into my bones. The weights I used to lift with ease started to feel impossibly heavy. I'd find myself getting out of breath just walking up the stairs to my apartment. I was eating more, trying to fuel the workouts, but I was losing weight. My clothes started to hang off my frame. I looked pale, gaunt. As the days passed, the contrast became more horrifying. I would struggle through a workout, feeling weaker than I had the day before. I'd stumble to the mirror, feeling frail and depleted. And the man looking back at me would be a titan. His skin would be tanned and vibrant, his muscles full and rippling with power. He looked like he was bursting with vitality. My vitality, one of the regulars, an older guy who was always there, caught me by the water sink one day. "Hey kid," he said, his friendly face creased with genuine concern. "You okay? No offense, but you look like hell. You're in here every day, but you're getting smaller. Just been working a lot." I lied, my voice sounding thin even to me, not getting much sleep. "Well, be careful," he said, clapping me on my bony shoulder. "Listen to your body. You look like you're running on fumes." I knew he was right, but I couldn't stop. I was an addict. I felt like I am using the gym as drug, just to get high when I look at the mirror. I needed to see him. I needed to see the man I was supposed to be. Even as the real me was fading away, the reflection started to change in other ways, too. It wasn't just a passive image anymore. One night, I was staring at him, and I saw him smirk. A small, confident, almost arrogant curl at his lips. It was my face, but it was not my expression. I felt a jolt of pure terror. I stumbled back from the mirror, my heart pounding. It was aware. It knew. The breaking point happened 2 weeks ago. I was trying to bench press a weight that had been my easy warm-up set just a month prior. I lowered the bar to my chest, and I couldn't push it back up. It was stuck, pinned. My arms were trembling, devoid of all strength. I felt a wave of dizziness wash over me. I had to shamefully tilt the bar to one side, then the weights crashed to the floor with a deafening clang. The entire gym went quiet. Everyone was staring. Humiliation washed over me, hot and sickening. I scrambled up and stumbled toward the locker room, avoiding everyone's eyes. But I couldn't resist one last look in the mirror. I looked like a ghost, a pale, skeletal figure with hollow eyes and sunken cheeks. But my reflection, he had never looked more powerful. He was posed, one arm flexed, a picture of perfect, radiant health. He was glowing with stolen energy. He looked at my pathetic, real form, and his eyes were filled with a cold, triumphant contempt. And I finally accepted the truth. It wasn't just a reflection. It was a parasite, and it was feeding on me. I went home and canceled my gym membership that night. The first few days were hell. My body ached with profound weakness, but worse than that was a psychological withdrawal. I felt a desperate, gnawing urge to go back, to see him again, to see how much stronger he had gotten. I needed to break the connection. I just needed to starve him. For 2 weeks, I didn't go near the gym. I started eating more, trying to rest. The deep fatigue began to lift, just slightly. I still felt weak, but I wasn't getting any worse. A tiny, fragile seed of hope began to sprout in my chest. Maybe it was over. Maybe, without me there to power it, the reflection had just faded away. 2 days ago, I went into the bathroom to brush my teeth. I stood in front of the sink, and I looked up normally as I brushed. It was a normal morning routine as always, but something was wrong. At first, I saw me, the real me, Still too thin, still too pale, but me. I smiled. I made a genuine, relieved smile, and my reflection didn't. It just stood there, its expression unchanged. And then, slowly, deliberately, it changed. The gaunt, tired features of my own face began to fill out. The shoulders in the mirror broadened. The chest thickened. The pale skin gained a healthy, vibrant glow. In the space of 5 seconds, I watched in silent, frozen horror as my own weak, tired reflection transformed into the magnificent, powerful creature from the gym mirror. He was here, in my house, in my mirror. He had followed me. He looked at me, his eyes filled with that same cold, triumphant confidence. And then he smiled. It was a wide, predatory, possessive smile. It was a smile of a victor who had finally escaped his prison bars. It was the smile of a parasite that had found its way into the host's heart. I don't remember screaming. I just remember the feeling of my legs giving out, of crashing to the floor, of scrambling backwards out of the bathroom like a terrified animal. I slammed the door shut, and I haven't opened it since. I'm trapped in my own home. My own reflection, a stronger, better version of me, is waiting for me in there. Has it taken over every reflection? If I look at my dark phone screen, will I see his face instead of mine? If I look into a puddle on the street, will he be looking back up? He's not just feeding on me anymore. He's replacing me. And I don't know what happens when he's finished. Will I just fade away completely? Will he be able to step out of the mirror and take my place? No one would ever know. He looks more like the man I was supposed to be than I do. So I'm asking you, anyone, what do I do? How do you fight your own reflection? Please help me. I can feel myself getting weaker just sitting here. And I can almost hear him on the other side of that door, humming like he wants to whisper.